My family and I were dining at an upscale restaurant when my husband, Eric, decided to take charge of the reservation I had made for my dad's birthday. To my surprise, he brought along his own parents and then made a comment that stung. A single father like yours doesn't belong in fancy restaurants. He should stick to cheap pubs. Although I was upset, I chose to respond calmly. You do realize this restaurant is owned by my brother, right? I said. I'm Elizabeth, a 27-year-old office worker. My parents divorced when I was young, and my dad raised me on his own. They split because my dad was always working, and it took a toll on my mom. Even though dad still loved her and didn't want the divorce, he eventually agreed when she said, I'm tired of waiting, set me free. After the divorce, I stayed with dad for financial reasons. He would always tell me, it's not your mom's fault. It's mine for relying on her too much and neglecting her. I regret making her feel lonely. Whenever I asked why mom left, he would just sigh sadly. Despite everything, dad always put me first. He attended all my school events and never missed a birthday or Christmas. Some people make hurtful remarks about us being a single-parent household, but dad's love made those comments easy to ignore. After the divorce, I occasionally saw my mom, but our relationship grew distant, especially after she remarried and had another child. Once I started working, dad retired early to enjoy a quieter life. He had worked so hard to support me, and I wanted him to finally focus on his own interests. Although I live on my own now, I visit dad frequently. 2 years ago, I married Eric, who had been introduced to me by a friend. Eric is hardworking and honest, and my dad quickly grew fond of him. His parents were also welcoming and accepted me immediately. However, the idea of moving into Eric's family home caused me significant distress, especially considering both my parents. My parents are getting older, and I constantly worry about them. They're both retired now and have become increasingly isolated, rarely going out or interacting with others. Moving in together seemed like a good opportunity for everyone, and Eric pleaded with me to consider it. Please, think about it, he said earnestly. Of course, I wanted to respond to his heartfelt request, but moving into his parents' house would put a considerable distance between me and my dad, making it difficult to check on him as often as I used to. Although dad is in good health, I feared that if something happened, he might not be found in time. I was torn about what to do, but eventually, dad offered his advice. I'm healthy enough to live on my own. I don't want to be a burden to you. You should take care of Eric's family. Just call me if anything happens, he emphasized. Reluctantly, I agreed to move in with Eric's parents, but just a few weeks after the move, I began to regret my decision. The people I thought were kind and welcoming began to show their true colors. Eric and his parents started treating me like a servant, leaving all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning solely to me while they did nothing. When I asked Eric for help, he brushed me off. I'm tired from work too. Housework is a wife's job, right? He retorted. My protests that I also worked fell on deaf ears. It's different. You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents, he would say dismissively. Coming home exhausted from work, only to face an endless list of chores, was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the chores. Eric's mother, Mary, made my life a living hell. She would deliberately spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the smallest speck of dust. This spot is dirty, clean it, she would order, leaving dirty clothes everywhere for me to pick up. After I had washed and carefully folded them, she'd say, these folds will crease the clothes, do it again, and then kick them apart. Mary often made cruel remarks about my upbringing, sneering, you can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family. How pitiful. It's amazing you can't hold a job. The company must be blind to hire someone like you. It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up. I was against marrying someone from such a family, but Eric insisted. I deeply disapproved. You should be more devoted to us and Eric. If we hadn't welcomed you as a wife, you'd be living a sad, lonely life with your dad. Hearing such insults about my dad made my blood boil, but I had to suppress the urge to lash out at Mary. The worst part was Dad John, my father-in-law, and Eric did nothing to intervene. Instead of supporting me, John would look at me with disdain. And Eric would even join Mary in mocking me. "Mom's right, you lack any gratitude toward us," he would say, echoing her sentiments. "Why is she so cold to you?" Eric sneered. "A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You hardly have any qualities beyond working and doing housework, so at least do those well. Don't even think about asking to share the chores. That's your role as a wife. Making excuses like being tired from work is completely unacceptable. I won't tolerate it," Eric dictated. Whenever I tried to argue or refuse, Eric's mood would shift dramatically, treating me as if I didn't exist. "How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me," he would shout. Mary, his mother, would chime in. "Don't stress Eric out when he's tired, only making things worse for me." Some of the furniture in my in-laws' house had been bought with my money, and not by choice. They had abruptly taken me to an electronics store, pressuring me to buy things. I capitulated under the public pressure, not wanting to cause a scene. But the harassment didn't stop there. When I tried to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me at every turn. "You're our wife now. Focus on our preparations. We have a feast to prepare and thorough cleaning to do. Your dads all alone won't be doing much, right? We have other relatives to entertain." They insisted. When I persisted in wanting to go home, they responded childishly, spilling juice on my packed clothes and hiding my shoes. Facing daily complaints and harassment, I reluctantly gave up the idea of going back home. Unable to reveal the truth, I told Dad, "The in-laws' house is busy with Christmas preparations, so I'll stay and help. I'm sorry I can't make it back." Dad didn't blame me. "It can be helped," he said gracefully. "Don't worry about it, it's busier there with more people. I can't manage fine alone here," he comforted me. Eric's ongoing tyranny made me seriously consider divorce, but I was troubled about how to break the news to Dad, who was always so understanding and kind. Determined to celebrate my father's 60th birthday without causing him any pain, I secretly made a reservation at a renowned fancy restaurant. Knowing Eric and his parents might object, I simply told them I needed to return home briefly. They grumbled but accepted my excuse when I promised it would be just for the day. Dad was overjoyed when he learned about the restaurant reservation. "I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter. Thank you so much," he said, and hearing his gratitude filled me with immense happiness. However, I never anticipated what would happen next. As we arrived at the restaurant and informed the staff about our reservation, we were met with a shocking revelation. There was already a reservation for 2 under my name, but 3 people were already seated. Confused, I went to check the reserved table and was stunned to find Eric and his parents sitting there. Eric looked up with a smug smile and sneered. "Too bad you can't outsmart us and dine fancy just by yourselves." The in-laws didn't even acknowledge us, engrossed in the feast they had presumably ordered for themselves. Dad, seeing Eric and the in-laws at the table, looked back and forth between us, clearly puzzled. He had only ever seen the pleasant side of Eric and his parents, so his confusion was understandable. Eric, suspecting something was up due to my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had secretly snooped through my phone. He discovered the reservation and preemptively ordered dishes for himself and his family to undermine our plans. With a triumphant expression, Eric began to mock us, "People from poor, single-parent households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place and be grateful we're allowing you this much. You should go to some cheap pub instead," he said loudly, drawing annoyed glances from other customers. Oblivious to the discomfort he was causing, he remained smugly self-satisfied. Dad, seated next to me, was dumbfounded by Eric's audacity. I was at my wit's end. I knew Eric and his family were selfish, but I never imagined they would stoop to such shameless levels. My anger reached its peak, threatening to ruin this special 60th celebration. Suppressing my urge to shout, I calmly addressed Eric as he sat there smirking. "This is my brother's restaurant," I said firmly. "He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday." At my words, Eric and the in-laws, who had been disinterestedly eating, Frumsy, my brother, who had been listening to the conversation from the back of the restaurant, appeared with a deeply displeased expression. Although he had been taken by Mom during the divorce, unlike our estranged mother, he has always maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. My brother owns the restaurant and had suggested celebrating Dad's 60th birthday here. He hadn't attended the wedding due to work commitments, but he had seen the photos and recognized Eric. Initially, he thought Eric and the in-laws at the reserved table were there to join the celebration with Dad, but seeing Eric mocking both me and Dad, and the in-laws not correcting him, my brother was furious. "How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that?" he said, his anger palpable. "I regret allowing you to be a part of this celebration. Just because you're Emily's family, is this how you always treat her?" my brother demanded, his anger evident. "I prepared this celebration for my sister's wish to honor Dad, not for people who hijack it to frill a meal. We'll celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion on another day. You'll be paying for what you ate," he declared firmly. Eric and his party began making excuses. "No, that's not it. We were really meant to celebrate," they protested, but my brother left them to the staff and came outside to join Dad and me. "I'm sorry for letting such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration," he apologized as we headed home. I explained to Dad all the mistreatment from Eric and his family. After listening quietly, Dad said, "If you're unhappy in your marriage, there's no point in staying. Don't worry about me. Come back home." So, instead of returning to the in-laws' house, I went straight to my own home. Shortly after, my brother called to inform me that Eric and his family had caused a scene over the bill but had reluctantly paid when threatened with police involvement. Minutes later, Eric called, furious. "Where are you? You've embarrassed us. Send the money we paid," he yelled. "I will pay a penny of it," I retorted. "I'm done with you, and we will be divorcing. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared." I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Eric and his family, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about the divorce, Eric panicked. "No one but me would marry a woman from a single-parent household. Do you want to upset Dad?" he threatened. I scoffed. "Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than deal with the likes of you," Eric warned. "You regret this. Think it over." But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Eric and I divorced. He was reluctant due to concerns about societal image, but eventually gave in. As the court date approached, I had gathered substantial evidence of psychological abuse, which ensured I received a fair settlement in the divorce. During the property distribution, I took steps to protect my assets and secure my future. I reclaimed the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, exercising my legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply pointed out that a purchaser naturally retains the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after moving back to my parents' home, Eric reached out, seeking reconciliation. He explained that on the day of the incident at the restaurant, his boss and colleagues had been there for a work celebration. They overheard everything he said to me and Dad. His boss, who had grown up in a single-parent household, was deeply disappointed in Eric's disparaging remarks. As a result, Eric's promising career was jeopardized. He lost his standing and any chance of advancement, and his colleagues regarded him with contempt as a psychological abuser. Eric's troubles didn't end at work. The in-laws' household had become chaotic. Before the divorce, Eric and the in-laws had offloaded all household chores onto me. After the divorce, they were now bickering over who should do the chores, with Eric being pressured to buy new furniture to replace what I had taken and contribute more financially. Eric pleaded, "I was wrong. Elizabeth, I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over." But my feelings had cooled significantly. It seemed likely that Eric was facing increased pressure to manage household chores at the in-laws' place and was trying to offload some of their financial demands onto me. I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I can't see you changing back and exploiting me again once we're married. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner. Maybe Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. We're divorced now. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer, I said, then hung up the phone. The mention of a lawyer seemed to resonate, as I received no further attempts at reconciliation from Eric. And now, I'm happily living at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both excited about the baby, while I'm not considering marriage anytime soon. If the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to choose more wisely.
Oh, you're the famous photographer. Are you here for a shoot today? The woman in front of me stared at me excitedly. She, whom I met at the beach during clamming season, seemed to know I was a photographer. Despite being busy playing in the sand with her family of 3, she listened to my story with great interest. It's deeply moving to recall my early days as a photographer, when I struggled to gain credibility and couldn't get any assignments. When I told her I was here for a shoot, she eagerly volunteered to be my subject. But could you please make sure not to show my child's face? She said this, pointing to a cute little girl. The girl, about 2 or 3 years old, looked at us with wide, round eyes. Of course. What about you? As I asked, the father looked pale and darted his eyes around, repeating vague responses. It's understandable, I guess. After all, the father building a sandcastle with the girl is my husband. My name is Sophia. A 30-year-old freelance photographer. Most of my work involves school events and weddings in the area. I capture moments brimming with smiles and friendship, sharing them through my photos. It's not just about taking pictures, but about capturing people's memories and emotions, sharing happiness. Capturing these joyful moments of people is my job and my passion. But my life's shutter stopped in an instant due to an unforeseen event. My husband, Oliver, was a busy businessman. Involved in developing leisure facilities and tourist spots, he traveled all over the country. Though we rarely had time together, the moments we shared were special. Even the briefest times with him, his smiles were what kept me going. I never intended to quit my photography. We promised to support each other, build our careers, and got married. I took the opportunity to work style from traveling around the countries to work from home. Starting with posting landscape and permitted portraits on social media. As virtual galleries and online exhibitions expanded my reach, not just among publishers and peers but also among a general audience, my followers rapidly increased. On social media, where I could do live streams, I began to earn from talking shows and explanations about my photographs. It was fulfilling and enjoyable that I told the backgrounds or discussed techniques sharing my photos. Steadily growing my followers, I balanced outdoor shoots with social media promotions. Oliver was still constantly on business trips. I inevitably spent more time with my in-laws, James and Emma, who showed interest in my social media activities. Teaching them how to use smartphones and social media, we grew closer, and they often tuned into my photos and live streams. Both are wonderful people who ensure my fulfilling days. The company kept me from feeling lonely while my husband was away. However, there was a significant void in our lives. We couldn't have children. Despite numerous tests, it just wasn't happening. As we both wanted kids, we were upset because we just couldn't seem to have a baby for years. And it started affecting us. Oliver, who once supportive, grew tired of the financial strain and frequent hospital visits, and became increasingly discouraged about infertility treatment. At that time, his project enters the climax, so he stays away from home for days, traveling around the countries. It was clear that his focus shifted from our childlessness to his challenging work. His concern for my inability to conceive diminished, replaced by work talks. I felt lonely but tried to understand his busyness. Yet, no matter how understanding, we weren't emotionally close. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a client, and it looks like a new project is starting. I'll probably be away for a while starting next week. He said this, taking shirts and other laundry from his large suitcase. I had just gotten back home, but still, I hurried to start the washing machine for them. Oliver, when he runs out of clean clothes, rather than doing laundry or sending them for cleaning, he just buys new shirts. He says it's faster and foolproof, but I prefer to save where we can. So, what about the hospital? That's impossible. I have to go too, right? I can't take off work, and next week is a no-go for me. I sighed softly, making sure my husband couldn't hear. I had made a hospital appointment, but there's nothing I can do if he's out on a business trip. It would be inconvenient for his company, and I was happy that his hard work was being recognized. I didn't want to be a nuisance. Well, but I'm busy too, and it's tough. You also out working on a shoot, right? Let's both keep up the hard work. Yeah. Take care of yourself too, Oliver. I was dismissed so easily, yet I didn't speak my mind. Maybe he doesn't want kids anymore. But I'm too scared to ask if that's really the case. Should I just accept it quietly, or should I bring it up, even if it's roundabout? I'm torn. I'm good at capturing people's joy and sorrow through my camera. But now, I'm just going through the days, not even aware of my own feelings. I feel like I'm getting trapped inside the frames of my photos. Then, one day, a well-textured white envelope arrived at our house, with a logo of a famous resort company on it. It didn't seem like just another piece of direct mail, so I hurriedly opened it. Inside was a voucher for a stay at a luxury hotel by the sea. And it appeared to be for 3 people. Why was this sent to us? With a sense of foreboding, I quickly went to my husband. Oliver, this came in the mail. Do you know anything about it? Of course, I wasn't accusing him from the start. I made sure to ask in a way that didn't sound confrontational, just casual. He stopped reading his newspaper and looked at me. His expression was blank, but his eyes narrowed slightly, almost glaring. I'd never been looked at like that before, and I couldn't hide the chill in my heart. Oh, that. A colleague couldn't make it, so it was booked in my name. It's nothing weird, so give it back. He reached for it. Without saying a word, I handed over the envelope and tickets. Oliver snatched them from me. But when he saw the name on it, he looked back at me, clearly annoyed this time. This is addressed to me, right? Don't open my mail without asking. I was taken aback and quickly apologized. But with my husband in sales, various DMs arrive. I've been disposing of the ones that come home without much thought, so I was surprised at his reaction. I'm sorry. I didn't know if it was direct mail, just wanted to check. I'm here today, you could have just asked me. He took the envelope to his room, and I couldn't ask any more about the tickets. I wasn't fully convinced why he had to book tickets for his colleague, but I had no choice but to accept his explanation. But then, not even half a month later, something else happened. It was May, approaching our wedding anniversary. We were supposed to gather at the in-laws' house, but he suddenly announced a long business trip. At first, I was speechless and confused. A business trip? On our wedding anniversary? In my job, I often get requests for family portraits or landscape photography. But I had plans, so I had taken the day off. Normally, a regular company, including Oliver's, would be off on Memorial Day. At least, his company should be closed as usual. He shrugged his shoulders lightly and forced a smile. It was a sudden decision, had to be done. I can't help but work through the holiday, so please go to the gathering for me. I know he's proud of his job and has been serious about his career since before we got married. But gradually, I find myself less convinced by his reasons for work and business trips in those casual moments. In the end, he just pulls along his favorite suitcase and leaves for work. Although they were angry at his attitude, because his call was so late that it was close to our wedding anniversary, they tried to make me comfortable. Sorry for making you free up your schedule in vain. I'll give Oliver a strict talking to next time I see him. Emma said that, but all I could do was give a wry smile. Originally, We were supposed to stay a few days after getting together. Oliver was the only child for them. I was told it would be sad if I left early, so I decided to stay a few days after our wedding anniversary as planned. I brought my camera and took pictures of them doing housework and everyday life, and scenes I usually don't focus on. I spent time thinking about shooting plans, but part of me felt the void of Oliver's absence. For work and a change of pace, I decided to visit the coast one station away. Around Memorial Day, the beach is busy with people clam digging and families enjoying their time. Some opened colorful beach umbrellas, enjoying walks and sunbathing. I walked along the beach with my camera around my neck. Suddenly, I stopped, noticing a family building a sandcastle. I paused at a familiar voice. I was glad I wasn't holding the camera in my hand. I thought that right in front of that scene, I wouldn't have been able to keep from dropping something. There was Oliver, with a young woman and a toddler, surrounding a sandcastle. They looked like a happy family, gathering white sand and shells. I couldn't believe my eyes. But then, the hotel tickets that arrived home, his frequent long business trips, his indifference, all came back to me. It would have been an ideal family scene for a photo shoot if it were a work assignment. But I couldn't believe my own husband was in it. The toddler, maybe 2 or 3 years old, seemed to match the time when I felt Oliver drifting away. He already had another family. Whether his real child or not, my intuition as a wife told me there was a blood connection. I felt like a glass frame in my heart was shattering. The photo inside that frame was supposed to be full of our happy smiles. I decided to speak up. Not to Oliver, but to the woman playing with the toddler. The woman, wearing a large straw hat, looked surprised as I suddenly spoke to her. I managed a smile and apologized for the abruptness. Then I pulled out my business card, explaining I'm a freelance photographer. My card only had my professional name, but also included my social media contact details. The woman looked interestedly at the card, then started searching for me on her mobile phone. Meanwhile, Oliver, fully aware of me, stared frozen at a point on the sand. "Would you mind if I take a photo of your family? I sometimes do live streams showing photography tips." "What? Sophia, I know you. I follow you. You post tips for mobile photography, right?" She was excited, unaware of my situation, happy to be approached by a minor celebrity on social media. I was surprised she was a follower, but her enthusiasm seemed to extend to agreeing to a live stream as well. When I boldly invited her, she was all in before I could finish. "Of course!" exclaimed, overjoyed. I felt guilty for deceiving, but my goal was to somehow document the other family Oliver had. "Can you teach me some photography tricks for mothers? Oliver, you're okay with that, right?" Oliver, caught off guard, was in a panic. I could tell he was desperately trying to avoid looking at me and thinking of an excuse. "Maybe we shouldn't, show faces. I do model for brochures, Oh, could you make sure not to include the child?" Later I learned that the other woman, Amelia, was a model he met through his company's PR work. Of course, I agreed, carefully adjusting the mobile phone camera to keep the child out of the frame. I set up for immediate streaming, and started a live broadcast under the guise of teaching Mother Amelia. With the child out of the picture, Oliver, who was attending to her, became the center of the screen. His strange smile was interpreted positively by viewers, quickly spreading as him being cute but nervous. After the live stream, I thanked them and left. But it wasn't long before Oliver chased after me and stopped me. He had left Amelia and the child behind. I just asked him, "What are you thinking?" But he just stood there, sullenly silent. Probably, being with Amelia was awkward, so he ran to me. What did he intend by stopping me? Finally, he spoke. "Sophia, please understand." How can I understand without a proper explanation? Well, I can guess after seeing. But I had no choice. I had a child with her before we had one. It's fine. Amelia's family is wealthy, and she said she doesn't need to marry me. Oliver finally confessed the truth, defiantly. I couldn't believe a young woman who got pregnant would say something so convenient. Probably, she knew he was married. I wanted a child. But you couldn't have one. She is nice and honest, and the child is adorable, looks just like her. But that doesn't mean I've come to dislike you or hate living with you. His words were incoherent, leaving me at a loss. He seemed to argue for maintaining the status quo. I won't trouble you. This situation is perfect for me. Isn't this good enough? As if that's an excuse. I should have argued back. But I was so overwhelmed with pain, I lost my voice. My husband, seeing me silent, sighed as if he had convinced me, and was about to leave. But then, unexpectedly, two people arrived. It was James and Emma. Oliver! Who is that woman and child? James, red-faced, shouted. Oliver was shocked by the sudden appearance of his parents. What? Why? I saw it on the live stream notification. Who is this long business trip with? Skipping home visits, with an unknown woman, and even a child. Before James could stop her, Emma stepped between Oliver and me, protecting me, sharply addressing Oliver. I was also shocked. They had seen the live stream on social media and realized something terrible was happening. Shocked by the sight of Oliver appearing as a couple with an unknown woman, they rushed over. Confronted by his parents, he ended up confessing everything about his relationship with Amelia and their child. Such a disgrace to the family. He was struck by a strong slap from Emma, who was rendered speechless. James glared at him with an expression so terrifying that I thought he would have punched him if not for the slap. They left Oliver behind and took me to their car. Following their apologies and strong recommendation, I decided to divorce. After exposing Oliver and his affair with Amelia and securing compensation from them, things settled down for a while. However, as the divorce proceedings and investigations went on, various truths came to light. Firstly, Amelia truly knew Oliver was married. Given her willingness to have a child without marriage, it seemed she had prepared herself to some extent for a relationship with a married man. She had tried to keep the issue under wraps not just for money, but probably to keep Oliver around as long as possible. Upon realizing this, she became outraged and blocked all my social media accounts. Not only that, she started posting recklessly on various platforms, inadvertently revealing herself as the other woman, which only garnered sympathy for me. Her relationship with a married man caused trouble in her family home. Being driven out and nearly losing her home, she brazenly tried to live in my former in-laws' house. Naturally, they firmly refused to let her set foot on their property. Next, Oliver's secrets began to unravel. During the compensation claim investigation, numerous women and men connected to him came forward. It turned out he had repeated affairs during his business trips, with several partners over multiple occasions. Some of these affairs involved women who were engaged or married. I decided to send the data from the infamous live stream. A little investigation would reveal that I, the legitimate wife, was the streamer, and the people on camera were Oliver's mistress and their child. As a result, women who were deceived into thinking he was single and husbands whose wives were taken from them became angry and sued Oliver. He faced lawsuits from many people, including me, with no choice but to accept them all. As the truth about my husband continued to emerge, Amelia fled with her child. Probably fed up, she chose to escape from her relationship with him. The turmoil she caused on social media calmed down, and her accounts disappeared, so I decided to let her be. However, considering her nature of boasting about affairs on social media, it was unlikely she would just disappear. Sure enough, Amelia started posting under a completely different account. But her posts, portraying herself as a tragic heroine, were quickly identified and sparked outrage. Subsequently, she would delete her account when things got bad and create new ones, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Abandoned even by Amelia, Oliver apparently turned to his parents in the end, but their learning about his multiple affairs infuriated them further. Without any apology and only asking for help because he was in trouble, the parents-in-law decided to sever ties with their son. After the infidelity scandal, Oliver was burdened with a significant amount of compensation. As legal proceedings progressed, inquiries from mistresses and their husbands poured into his company, complicating the situation further. Worse still, this wasn't the worst outcome. His face being exposed on social media and the revelation of a child from an affair was an unprecedented scandal, especially since it happened during a business trip. The information spread quickly, and comments of shock and anger flooded related facilities and reviews associated with his company. The drop in trust due to the scandal spread both internally and externally, prompting the management to feel a sense of crisis and rush to devise strategies. However, not being familiar with crisis management, they were forced to hastily consult experts and develop communication strategies. Meanwhile, they instructed employees to provide accurate information, desperately trying to quell the confusion. The scandal led to numerous inquiries and criticisms from both inside and outside the company, rapidly tarnishing Oliver's reputation. He became an outcast at work, completely isolated within the company. In an uncomfortable atmosphere, the company soon wished for his resignation, and Oliver had to look for a new job. He was competent and had good sales performance. Preferred by older generations who don't use social media, he quickly found a new job. But human nature doesn't change. In less than 6 months, he was rumored to have made advances on the manager's wife and tried to expense motel charges from a business trip. He was fired and, even after joining new companies, kept causing troubles in his relationships and getting dismissed. After repeating this cycle, he is now hopping from one industry to another, being driven out from everywhere. Meanwhile, I maintained a relationship with my parents-in-law even after the divorce. Thanks to their care, I have been living peaceful days. It's because of their support that I was able to start anew after my relationship with Oliver ended. For a while after the divorce, I found it painful to take photos of children. Even though they got hurt betrayed by their son, they made an effort to show their good relationship and supported me. They helped me realize that my relationship with Oliver wasn't everything about marriage. They cared to give me the strength to believe again. One day, I captured a photo of my parents-in-law talking peacefully. I plan to feature this photo in my next online photo exhibition. They were quite embarrassed, but I think they'll be happy in the end. I'm Vivian, 27 years old, and a pregnant woman about to give birth soon. My husband Bobby is 3 years older than me, a bit selfish, but I've always relied on him as I'm indecisive. However, being pregnant made me realize that boyfriends and husbands are different, and so are husbands and fathers. As a boyfriend, I appreciated him taking the lead, but as a married couple, it felt different. He just wouldn't listen to others. Whenever I gave an opinion, he would negate it, insisting he was always right. And now, as I'm trying to change into a mom, he still hasn't quite become a husband. He seems to hold the reins in our relationship. His values are, frankly, quite outdated. Sure, some couples work well that way. I've heard that was how it used to be. Husbands would earn a lot, allowing wives to focus solely on housework and childcare. But his salary isn't something to brag about. In fact, I was earning more before my maternity leave. I kept quiet about it though, to avoid upsetting him. He spends as much as he has, so we still keep our savings separate. I've been saving bit by bit, so I can manage the expenses even during maternity leave, something he doesn't seem to grasp. He probably thinks he's supporting me with his income alone. Likely, it's the influence of his parents. His mother has always been a housewife, with his father as the sole earner. That's fine. Both of his parents respect each other. I got that impression when I met them. A wife supporting her husband, and a husband supporting his wife, made it work. In our case, Bobby seems to look down on me. I don't mind him emulating Fael, but I wish he'd learn how to treat his wife as well. When Emael, Wallace, gave birth, Fael supported her as best he could and was proactive in childcare. Even at our first meeting, they seemed like a great couple, the kind I wanted us to be. With my due date being around Christmas, I wonder whether we should go to the in-laws' house. Then, an incident occurred at the end of the year, just before giving birth. In the afternoon, Bobby called from work. "Today's the last day of work before the holiday, so after I'm done, my colleagues will come over for drinks." Wait a minute, my due date is soon, right? You can't predict when the baby will come, at least go out to drink somewhere else. Faced with this unbelievable suggestion, I was at a loss for words. What? Are you trying to annoy me? I've already told my colleagues. Don't embarrass me. You always said, don't bring anyone over at the last minute. I told you first thing in the morning. Mom said she gave birth to me 2 days after her due date, and my sister was born a week late. So, a due date is just a guideline. That varies from person to person. Sure, a due date is just a prediction, but we need to be cautious around that time. That's exactly what Wallace said when I announced my pregnancy. But she also said, it would be so much easier if babies would just listen to us before they're born. Bobby apparently not paying attention to that. Continued after a click of his tongue. So, I'll stay home when the due date comes. Don't use pregnancy as an excuse to tie me down. I didn't see your messages today, so clean the house by the time I get back. It was messy when I left this morning. Don't embarrass me, and prepare food and drinks, okay? Remember to keep your promises. Wait, I'm pregnant. I can't even clean up. Remember I asked you to do it yesterday? The mess was because you didn't clean up. He seemed to recall and then got angry. You're a housewife, right? You're being supported, so don't make me do housework. Just do it already. Saying that, he hung up. The mess he was referring to was actually made by him yesterday. He had brought colleagues home just before returning once before. I did ask him to inform me in the morning, but I never expected him to do this, especially not so close to the due date. My belly weighs about 3 kilos now, putting pressure on my organs. You wouldn't understand unless you've been through it. I didn't understand until I got pregnant. My sister-in-law, who's already had a baby, keeps in touch frequently. I feel blessed to share these hardships with her. Wallace reminisces about the past and brings things I need, and Raphael helps out too. The in-laws' house is really nice. The baby in my belly, perhaps worried about me, kicks me repeatedly. It felt like a sign not to comply with his demands. So, I called his office. The person who answered passed the call to him. Hello, Bobby? It's impossible today. My belly's been kicked so much, I just can't move. What? Don't call for something like that. I'll drink at a colleague's place then. Don't call the office again. It's embarrassing, cut it out. At least clean up. If you don't, it's divorce, understand? All I could hear was the cold electronic tone in my ear. I couldn't believe he was this terrible. Lately, he has been using divorce as a threat for everything. He thinks I'm afraid of divorce now that we have a baby. He uses it to make me anxious. According to him, it's discipline. The only reasons I haven't divorced him are the possibility of change after the baby's birth and the in-laws' presence. How can someone from such a good family turn out like this? Knowing Sael, it's definitely not the parents-in-law's upbringing. It must be his friend's influence. At our wedding, one of his friends said, "Keep your wife in check." After that, he started acting more arrogantly towards me. Since the wedding, he has been acting even more bossy towards me. Just then, the phone rang at the perfect time, and I answered it. Hello, Vivian, how are you feeling? Wallace, it's not my body, it's my mood that's terrible. Wallace sounded a bit panicked over the phone. The due date is Christmas, right? You might feel like you have a lot to do, but prioritize your baby and yourself first. Thank you. But the problem isn't that. I'm sorry to say, but I might end up divorcing. I don't want to part from you guys, but I've reached my limit with this incident. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. Wallace sounded frantic on the other end. What happened all of a sudden? Can you explain? Bobby called earlier, saying he's bringing colleagues home tonight. He told me to clean up and buy drinks and prepare. If I can't do that, he said it's divorce. So, I guess there's no other choice but to divorce. I've been threatened like this for a while now. Even the usually cheerful Wallace was silent, listening. I'm sorry, I didn't notice. Bobby told me you were going to give birth near your parents' home. What? I'm not at my parents', I'm at our house. I didn't understand why he would lie about that, but her response clarified it. That's why I've been giving him money every day, as he said he could eat properly. I should have taught him housework to reduce your burden. That's my responsibility too. No, she did teach him. It's clear from how Fael is. He just chose to escape. Even Fael does the household himself. Really? I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I almost became an ungrateful wife without knowing the situation. No, it's our fault too. If you're not at your parents', we're neglectful parents. We should have helped more. When he gets drunk, he won't get away with it. I'll give him a piece of my mind next time. I was relieved to have a mother-in-law who would stand up for her son's wife like this. Thank you. I'm really happy I can rely on you, Wallace. You're like a real mom to me now. I lost my mother early, so her friendliness meant a lot to me. I'm feeling okay for now, so I'll try to clean up. I'll order the drinks for delivery and take a break once it's done. Don't push yourself too hard. If anything happens, I'll come right away. After I finished cleaning and was taking a break, he came back home. The party was mostly his colleagues being considerate, but a drunk Bobby started giving orders. Hey, we're out of drinks, bring some more. As he said this, a colleague went to get them, but that only made him angrier. Don't use my colleague, you've embarrassed me again. His colleagues, looking disdainful, soon said they had to leave. Fortunately, it was the holiday season, so there were plenty of excuses. As they left, he passed out, and I saw them out. One of them apologized profusely as they were leaving. We heard you were pregnant, but didn't expect you to be at home. Please take care of yourself. And stopped me as I tried to follow them to the door. After that, I don't remember much for a while. Later, Wallace told me she couldn't get through on the phone and found me unconscious when she arrived. She had called an ambulance in a hurry. I regained consciousness on a hospital bed. Still feeling weak, I decided to keep my eyes closed and rest a bit. Just then, the door to the hospital room opened. What the hell, you're sleeping soundly. I rushed here for nothing. The house is still a mess, nobody's there, and I get a message to come to this hospital? You've embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. It's definitely divorce now. In fact, wake up already, I need you to sign the divorce papers. The juniors were disgusted with you. A wife who can't even prepare properly, maybe I should divorce you quickly without you noticing the affair. That way, I can marry my girlfriend. No alimony, huh? Am I a genius or what? No, you're an idiot, I wanted to shout, but I had to pretend not to notice and gather evidence. But how? Just then, Bobby's mobile phone chimed with a notification. He looked puzzled. Why am I getting a message from Vivian? What? I'm keeping Vivian's phone? Take care of your wife if you want it back? Who is this, some creepy person? Take care of my wife, like I don't need her. Thinking I was unconscious, he kept talking. Ever since getting pregnant, she's gotten lazy with housework, doesn't care about her appearance, and just keeps getting fatter. That's natural, I thought, I'm pregnant with your baby. I need nutrition for two. The doctor even said my weight gain was appropriate. He probably doesn't know that. Ah, if only my mobile phone was nearby, I could have recorded this. and to think he's having an affair too. His morals are skewed, but so is that woman. Would you be able to forgive yourself if you were in the same position? Is it even right to engage in adultery with a straight face when your beloved's baby is about to be born? In the first place, is it right to commit adultery? Hey, is the person messaging actually her affair partner? That would make sense, huh? So she having an affair too? What ridiculous reasoning. Does he have the brain of an elementary school detective? People who cheat always think their partner is doing the same. Bobby must know he's in the wrong. There's only one truth, and no justification for infidelity. Then his phone rang again. Huh? I'm not the affair partner? Is this guy psychic? Then who is it? Strangers shouldn't meddle in our business. Who's a stranger? This is a family matter. The door opened, and Wallace barged in. What? Why's Mom here? Why wouldn't I be? I sent the message. Bobby seemed flustered by this unexpected visitor. No way, you came all the way from home? I didn't think you would be here, let alone have Vivian's phone. Don't tell me, Mom, you've been brainwashed with lies to excuse her laziness, right? She began to speak quietly, regretting what he had done. I've been listening to everything you've said since entering this room, using the mobile phone there. He looked where she was pointing and seemed shocked. She had hidden her phone in the gap of my bed and connected a call to my phone. The recording function was also used, so the affair was fully exposed. The worst part is, you neglected Vivian, who's risking her life to give birth to your baby, to mess around. You don't deserve to be a dad. It was an impulse. Vivian hadn't been paying attention to me for a while. Just then, one of my junior female colleagues was, well, giving me attention. Hearing those words, I reached my limit and sat up, shouting. Don't joke with me. I'm trying to give birth with all my might. And you play around on a whim? He, finding no words to reply, looked down in silence. You have acted despicably. If you mention divorce, I have no choice but to accept it. When it happens, I'll be on her side. I almost died giving birth to you. I've told you this before. Your sister can't forgive your actions as a woman either. She just gave birth recently too. He made a face as if to say, crap. Doesn't he understand that when having an affair? But look, I rushed here as soon as she woke up. The affair was a momentary lapse, I swear I won't do it again. I really wasn't myself. I won't invite work colleagues home anymore. I'll end the affair and give all my salary to you. Please, consider this my last chance. Saying this, he kept apologizing. I smiled and called out to him. Bobby. Hearing my voice, he looked at me, as if relieved of his guilt. Thank you, Vivian. I'll really change. What are you misunderstanding? This was your last chance. Understanding my words, his face shifted from relief to despair. By the way, Dad, me, and your sister haven't forgiven you. Dad even said, don't come home even if you divorce. Basically, you're disowned. I think that's only fair. No way, give me a break. Where am I supposed to go? He grasped at her feet as if begging. Bobby, you neglected your wife who's about to give birth, had an affair, invited colleagues home, and sent her to the grocery store. That's 2 strikes for me and Dad. So there's still... Before he could finish, I spoke. No. Sister-in-law makes it 3 strikes, and I'm the game set. We'll divorce once the baby is born. As for the broken promise, make sure you pay alimony and child support as a dad. I need to be a father to the baby. Don't divorce me. I'll give you all my money. I'll lose my position at work. Even now, he seemed more concerned about saving face. That's fine. Your work colleagues have already contacted me while you were on your way here. Remember when you invited them home without notice and gave out my contact? Someone I didn't recognize called, saying they were supposed to come today. I didn't know the situation, thought your wife went back to her parents. It'll probably be gossip after the holiday season. Please, explain to them it's a misunderstanding. Still seeking self-preservation, he didn't seem to care about me. Misunderstanding? It's the truth. The baby will be raised by me, my parents, and your family. We all agreed unanimously. By now, and make sure you keep your promises this time. This was what Bobby had told me over the phone. Her parents, your dad and sister, are coming soon. Take responsibility for your actions. We'll apologize for our son's misconduct at the end. Then we'll make sure she and the baby don't suffer. We won't be lenient. We'll front the money, but this isn't for you, it's for her. Work hard at Dad's friend's workplace to pay it back. You won't be comfortable at your current job anyway. You have no choice. Fine, I'll figure out the money. I'll remarry my girlfriend. She loves me. She's making money online streaming, something about relationship advice. Love Me channel, that's it. I'll join her and make a fortune. Then I'll be a billionaire. Planning all alone, how foolish. Well, good luck with that, you're a fool till the end. Wallace, it's fine. Bye now. Bobby left cheerfully, but with trembling feet. He fled before Raphael and Sael arrived. The next day, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I had a lawyer handle the alimony and child support claims. Of course, I claimed from his girlfriend too. I continued interacting with my ex-husband's parents, and after settling into motherhood, I received alimony from Bobby. He refused the advance from Raphael and borrowed from consumer finance. And it seems, from shady places too. He thought he could repay quickly with his girlfriend's earnings. But reality isn't so sweet. His girlfriend left her job after their relationship became known at the company, making things awkward. The incident of him drinking at home spread around his company, and he quit. His last hope, the streaming, leaked somewhere, and the channel disappeared due to the affair despite being about relationship advice. Doing bad things doesn't pay off. Who leaked it? Sael was giving a thumbs up, but it must be my imagination. If he hadn't mentioned the channel name, maybe it wouldn't have gone this far. In the end, he couldn't pay back and is now missing. My daughter and I will surely be lovingly raised by two wonderful families. One day, as the end of the year was approaching, I received a panicked call from my son's stepdaughter, Aurora, urging me to come to their house immediately. I drove to my son's house, a place I hadn't visited for a while. Just then, Grace? Grandma! My granddaughter Grace, sitting on the concrete steps of the entrance, was hugging her knees, looking cold in her school tracksuit. What's going on? Why are you out here in such light clothing? And where are your mom and dad? They went on an overseas trip with my sister. What? Anyway, get in the car. You're freezing. In a rush, I got Grace in the car and bought her a warm drink at the first grocery store I saw. Later, when I met with Aurora at my house, I was infuriated by what my son and his wife had done. These children relied on me, so I felt a sense of duty to help them. Aurora, do you have the keys? To their house? Yes. Then let's go now. And just take what's important. What are we going to do, Grandma? I smiled. We don't need that house anymore, do we? My name is Arya, 64 years old. I lost my husband 2 years ago and now live alone. Still, my days are fairly busy. Because I'm wrapped up in managing what my husband had left behind. When I married 40 years ago, my in-laws were what you might call an old family in the countryside. I never imagined I'd end up managing this large house. My family home was within a train ride to the city center. Yes, my husband was my college classmate. We got married right after graduation. I moved to this unfamiliar countryside, relying solely on him. I was surprised to see my husband, who until then had been a mere student like myself, suddenly being treated as the son and heir of a prominent local family. Karen, my mother-in-law at the time, thoroughly instilled in me the importance of treating one's husband with due respect. Her words were the law in this area, and although it was frustrating, I understood and complied. Thanks to that, even now, with no one left, I'm still treated with a certain respect as the manager of this house and land. I got married at a time when ordinary people were yearning to move out to the city center. Back then, I was seen as an oddity for coming all the way to the countryside. Karen probably gave me strict training to quickly dispel such views from the locals. And then, we had a child soon after our marriage. It was a boy, and he was celebrated by the people around us as the heir, including Karen herself. However, after having our son, my health deteriorated, leading to a less intimate marital life. At the end of the day, he was our only child. How I've regretted that over the years. But now that my son is married and my in-laws and my husband are gone, I am the one who manages this house and land. I've been left with a substantial passive income, enough to comfortably maintain this spacious home and live freely. Of course, a certain level of knowledge and the utilization of skilled individuals are essential for its upkeep. Thanks to the foundation laid by Karen and my efforts to keep up with the papers even after college, I've managed to avoid falling prey to the deceit of relatives and associated parties who frequent the premises. There are times, even at this age, when I must learn new things, but that adds a sense of vibrancy to life. There was one reason why I needed to work hard and manage everything like this. My husband left all his assets to me in his will. Why? It was due to the nature of our son, Thomas. Under normal circumstances, the inheritance would have been equally divided between myself and Thomas. However, my husband chose not to do this. He had expressed his concerns several years before passing. If I leave him half of this house now, it will go to ruins. I want you to see if Thomas can change for the better. I thought about those words as his last will and testament. Because Thomas had gotten married to his second wife. Thomas had been with his first wife, Victoria, for a little over 10 years. But he got married again just 6 months after Victoria had passed away from an illness. He married the woman he had been having an affair with. My husband, who had been out of shape, seemed astonished by what was really going on with his son, who had seemed to be doing so well. This only served to worsen his condition. Thomas was an adult and married. Up until then, I saw him as an heir with no particular problems. Yet, I confess, there might have been a tendency to overly indulge him as our only heir. It was not just me, but everyone in the family. He was academically competent, progressing from a reputable high school to college. Although he had the option of attending a college in the city, he chose to remain local. After graduation, he got a job at an acquaintance's company. And then he married a local girl. That's when Thomas expressed his desire to get his own home and live independently. We constructed a house on a piece of land we owned for the young couple. Thomas and his wife Victoria got along very well. However, after the birth of their daughter Grace, Victoria's health began to deteriorate. The doctors declared she couldn't have any more children. It reminded me of my own experiences, so I did what I could to help her. Her biological mother frequently visited her too. We also arranged for babysitters and housekeepers. For a time, Victoria's health seemed to get better. But about a decade later, she was diagnosed with cancer. Looking back, Victoria was an incredibly resilient woman. She probably felt guilty for the trouble her health issues caused shortly after their marriage. That's likely why she endured so much during this time. Unfortunately, by the time the cancer was discovered, it was already too late. With our granddaughter Grace clinging to her, Victoria passed away far too young. During this time, I felt sorrow for various reasons. The most significant reason was how much I thought of Victoria as my own daughter. I also dearly loved my granddaughter, Grace. It pained me that she lost her mother. But there was another major issue weighing heavily on my heart. While Victoria was receiving medical treatment every weekend, Thomas already had a mistress. Perhaps that's why he hardly ever visited her. After Victoria's death, Thomas remarried in less than 6 months. His new wife, Olivia, was originally a woman from the club Thomas frequented. Surprisingly, by that time, they had already been in a relationship for over 5 years. Victoria's diary, which she left behind for me, was filled with detailed accounts of the days Thomas stopped coming home. Maybe she intended to use it as evidence for a divorce one day. We'll never know now. The new wife, Olivia, was 2 years older than Thomas. She moved into the house we had built without hesitation with her daughter, Aurora, who was 6 years older than Grace. Of course, I was opposed to this marriage. Thomas had been unfaithful to Victoria and had an affair with a woman in the nightlife business for a long time. He rarely bothered to visit his sick wife, and he even remarried soon after she was gone. I never imagined my son could be so heartless. But Thomas said, "I married the woman you set me up with, Mom. Haven't I fulfilled my duty?" Besides, Victoria wasn't perfect either. She fell ill before bearing a male heir. What was the point of marrying her? I couldn't even enjoy a good marital life with her. I had to get out and blow off steam, or else it would have affected my work. I had always known Thomas was cold towards Victoria. But this was beyond cruel. I blamed myself, wondering where it all went wrong with Thomas. Had we spoiled him too much, being our only son? Certainly, both my husband and I had done so. And the people surrounding us had pampered him as the only son of a prestigious family. But still, we had taught him right from wrong when he was young. With these thoughts, I had stayed away from my son's household for a while. It was also because of how busy I was following my husband's death. They would only visit at Christmas. But that was a mistake. It happened one day towards the end of the year. The temperature fluctuated wildly even into December, with days warm enough to make you sweat after only moving around a little, followed by sudden freezing winds. It was not easy for an aging person like myself. Nevertheless, it was the end of the year. While I was in the middle of dealing with reports from various sources, my private mobile phone suddenly rang. Who could it be? It was an unfamiliar number. But it was my private phone. Not many people knew this number. I decided to answer. "Excuse me, are you Grace's grandmother?" It was a young woman's voice. "Grace's, yes, I am. And you are?" "I'm sorry for the sudden call. I'm Aurora." It was Olivia's daughter. Why was she contacting me? "I don't have much time, so let me just say this. Could you please come to our house right away?" Where was she calling from? The background noise was quite loud. "Excuse me? What's going on?" "I understand it's hard to earn your trust, seeing as I'm the one calling you. But there's no time. I'll explain later. I'm sorry." With that, Aurora ended the call. It felt like I was being skillfully manipulated, but fortunately, I had a bit of time to spare. As I hurried outside to get my car, a cold, dry breeze brushed against my cheeks. I suddenly remembered that today was colder than yesterday. I drove to my son's house, a place I hadn't visited for some time, and parked in the driveway. It had enough room for 4 cars, but there were only 2. Were Thomas and the others there? With that thought, I got out of the car and headed towards the entrance. Just then, "Grace? Grandma!" I rushed over to her. Grace was sitting on the concrete steps of the entrance, hugging her knees and looking cold in her school tracksuit. "What's going on? Why are you out here in such light clothing? And where are your mom and dad?" "They went on an overseas trip with my sister." "What?" I felt something was off when I heard those words. "Anyway, get in the car. You're freezing." In a rush, I got Grace into the car and bought her a warm drink from the first grocery store I saw. She must have been really cold. She carefully warmed her hands before slowly opening the lid and taking a sip. I wanted to ask her immediately what had happened, but decided it was more important to drive safely back home. Once home, I took Grace to the living room. I called the housekeeper on the way and asked for 2 warm cups of tea and some snacks. The moment we entered the room and Grace felt the warmth, she looked relieved, and that gave me a really bad feeling. Feeling better? Yeah. Her response and her whole demeanor seemed younger than I remembered. She should be a growing girl at the age of 14. Even when she cried by her mother's sickbed, her wrists seemed to have more flesh on them. Wrists, hands? Grace, what happened here? Upon closer inspection, Grace's hands had severe chapping. I remember kids sometimes had that when I was young, but it's not something you see often nowadays. Oh, this started last year. It looks painful. Are you using any cream? No. I don't have any cream. I think it's from using hot water for bathing, washing dishes, and laundry. What? No housekeeper lately? Dad made her leave. Said it costs too much, so he told me to take on her job. What about your mom? Olivia? She's busy with lots of stuff, and Dad doesn't like it if her hands get rough. And your stepsister? My sister is. I stopped her. Did they tell you to call her that? Grace nodded silently. Dad told me to call her that when we're outside. At home, I call her Aurora. I prefer that too. All right, then let's go with that. Okay. And Grandma, that person isn't my mom. She told me to call her Olivia. I don't want to, but if I don't, she hits me. Grace said with a bitter smile. What does that mean? What had been going on in that household while I had been staying away? Eventually, after eating about half of the cake brought to her, Grace suddenly seemed to remember something. She reached into the pocket of her tracksuit and pulled out a mobile phone. It looked like the kind a grade schooler would have. Grace used it and began typing a message. What are you doing? Aurora told me to message her when you arrived, Grandma. She did. Yes. Aurora bought me this phone. Really? What about your previous one? Dad took it away not long after he remarried. That person told him it was too early for me to have one. That person? She must be referring to Olivia. Didn't your dad say anything? Grace shrugged her shoulders and frowned. Dad doesn't know anything about me. I couldn't get in touch with my friends for a while, so Aurora bought me this phone, saying she's sorry it's not the latest model. She also told me to make sure she'll never find it. Make sure she'll never find it. Who is she? It's Olivia, who had taken away the previous phone. Oh, Grandma. Aurora messaged back. She's on her way here from the airport. Really? Wasn't she supposed to be on a trip abroad? She said she'd pretend to go and come back, so she told me to wait. She said she'd slip away somehow. What exactly was going on between these two? At that moment, all I could do was wait. Aurora arrived at our house 3 hours later, after taking multiple buses. It's a provincial city, after all. Even if she came straight from the nearest airport, it would take a considerable amount of time. I'm sorry, Arya. Thank you for picking up Grace after such a short and sudden call. Aurora apologized deeply. Aurora. Her tone was clear and firm. Her gaze was unwavering. I thought to myself that although this girl looked flashy like Olivia, she seemed well-grounded. So what's with those two? Going on a trip abroad? They had been talking about going with the 3 of us for a while. But I wasn't sure what would happen there, so I pretended to get sick to get away. They planned to spend 3 weeks abroad, going all the way from Italy to the UK. 3 weeks? What about their jobs? This story seemed even darker than I had anticipated. And it seems like my mother was planning to hand me over to that man during this trip. What do you mean? Exactly what I said just now. That man had his eyes on both my mother and I from the beginning. Oh, my goodness. Hey, it's true, Grandma. Grace interjected, clenching her fist and sitting next to Aurora. I saw Dad insisting Aurora join him when I was done cleaning the bath many times. She always managed to brush it off as a harsh joke, but Dad would click his tongue and yell at me to go away when I was wandering around nearby. No, it's because of Grace that it didn't get any worse than that. I was always worried that Grace would get hurt. But I can't imagine what would have happened if she wasn't there. What on earth was going on? My son. How far has he corrupted? I pondered for a moment in front of the two girls. The way they protected each other. It seemed that they got along well. No, it was more than that. They were like comrades against a common enemy. So, how do you get by? Grace, you said earlier that Olivia told you to call her by her name, right? Yes. My mother started dating him for the money and even stayed with him through marriage. I've seen that man coming over to our house since high school. I've noticed the way he gradually started looking at me inappropriately. And now, because we live in the same house, he's getting cocky. Oh, how I hate it. Aurora said this while hugging herself, clearly disgusted. But I'm grateful for being allowed to continue my studies. I've been going to college and working part-time, trying to stay away from home as much as possible. Though, I thought about moving out. Aurora stayed because of me. Grace interjected. Even today. Those two left me alone without giving me a key or any money, telling me to go somewhere. And in that tracksuit. The wind would make her feel even colder. The sight of her waiting there, hugging her knees. I waited because Aurora told me to. Until those two boarded the plane and it was clear they weren't coming back. So, that's why you called? Yes. I was right by their side until just before their boarding time. But if I had left Grace alone, she would have caught a cold. So I made a call when they weren't looking. I knew she was still cold though. I'm sorry. Honestly, they could have contacted me earlier, but I guess these young girls wanted to make sure those two were definitely abroad before reaching out. And now that they're relying on me, I must do what I can for these girls. Aurora, do you have the keys? To their house? Yes. Then let's go now. And just take what's important. What are we going to do, Grandma? I smiled. We don't need that house anymore, do we? And then, we were 3 weeks into the new year. The new year had begun and people started going back to school and work. Just then, two people came storming into my house, dragging suitcases. Mom! What was that all about? Thomas yelled at me right away. Apparently, he had gone back home without giving any thought. And then he saw it. There was nothing left there. Well, that was my property. I thought it was useless, so I had it demolished and the land sold. Oh, your belongings are in this storage room. Right after that incident, I had contacted a real estate agent and a demolition company I knew well. When they learned of the situation, they immediately took me up on my offer. I tossed the keys to the storage room at Thomas. The two of them missed, and a small clang echoed in the entrance. Don't mess with me, Mom! That was my house! Oh, why would you think that? Huh? What do you mean? Thomas, you seem to be mistaken. That house was built for you, but it was registered under me and my husband. And now, it's mine. What does it matter what I do with it? What about my daughters? What did you do with them? Your daughters? You're one to talk, Olivia. I sneered. Then, please, come in. I gestured for the two to come inside. What? Not the living room? I led them silently. Our destination was the spacious hall in the back. Thank you for waiting. I opened the door after walking down the central corridor. There were a dozen or so people waiting in the room. But the first people that caught the eyes of the two behind me were Grace? Aurora? My granddaughters were sitting next to the chair I was about to take. Aurora, why did you ignore my calls? Grace, you ratted us out to Mom. When did you become so cunning? Thomas and Olivia, perhaps in a fit of anger, with red faces, tried to approach the girls, but they were restrained by the people in the room and forced to sit opposite us. Still looking at us breathlessly, they didn't seem to notice the people around us. Now that everyone is here, let's begin. I looked around at everyone and spoke. Let's proceed, everyone. Thank you for your cooperation. Shall we begin with you? Thank you. Hey Thomas, tough break coming back from your long vacation. But there's no going forward from here. At that voice, Thomas was startled and turned to his left. Sir! The managing director spoke in a calm voice, but his eyes weren't smiling. I never thought you'd actually apply for a 3-week vacation. I hoped you'd quit such bad habits by now. Thomas shrank under the low, commanding voice. He's always been arrogant towards his inferiors, but weak to those above him. He's been like that since childhood. But until now, you have approved. Look, Thomas. What do you think your value is? What? If you don't know, let me tell you. Your only value to our company is your status as the heir to this prestigious family. Thomas gritted his teeth. But it seems that doesn't mean anything anymore. What do you mean? The managing director then turned to me. Thomas. I looked straight at my son. His gaze visibly faltered. I was going to announce to everyone here today the contents of the will I wrote the other day in the presence of your lawyers. A will? Yes, I had to write it in advance, right? Otherwise, my inheritance would go to you, wouldn't it? Mom? I've already stored it in a safe place. It's simple. In the event of my passing, all of my inheritance will go to Grace. Thomas's jaw dropped in shock. Then, after a few seconds, no, I must have heard something strange. It's odd, maybe my ears haven't adjusted from the flight? No. Arya hasn't said anything strange. Our family lawyer interjected. The previous head of the family excluded Thomas as the heir because of his behavior and spending at that time. I remember Arya's words well. Yes, I remember that time. Only now you remember? I shook my head in disbelief. Then the company's managing director took over the conversation, picking up where the lawyer and I left off. It seems Arya has decided to completely strip you of your inheritance rights. That means there's no reason for us to treat you specially anymore. But how can? What mattered to our company was the connection with this region's large landowning family, not your personal capabilities. Now, what to do next? The managing director looked at me. I nodded slightly. Please proceed as you see fit. Thank you. Thomas, the entire company knows you applied for a 3-week vacation for a mere trip. The higher-ups are planning your demotion and reassignment. Be grateful that's all you're going to get. Thomas collapsed on the spot as if all his strength had left him. That's ridiculous! At that moment, Olivia leaned forward. Arya, if Grace is the heir, what about Aurora? Is Aurora different? Aurora? Why would you think that? She's Thomas's child too, isn't she? Isn't Aurora sitting next to Arya for that reason? Stop the unsightly act, Mother. Aurora sharply cut in. Unsightly? I'm not related to this family by a single drop of blood. How could a complete stranger claim any rights here? Are you stupid? How dare you speak to your mother that way? I've been leaving messages asking when you'd rejoin our trip, and you didn't reply at all. That's right. We'd been looking forward to it. Thomas even chimed in. Looking forward to it. Aurora took out her mobile phone. Excuse me, everyone. Could you listen to this for a moment? The room buzzed with curiosity. Come on, Aurora, won't you join me in the bath today? I'm sorry, I have a part-time job now. What? Can't you just do as I say? A dull thump, probably the sound of Thomas slapping the washing machine. Stop it, Dad. Aurora doesn't like it. Shut up. There was a noise along with Grace's voice. Grace! Aurora, you have a part-time job, right? Go, hurry. Thank you. There were some footsteps, then more sounds in the background. Ah, so what the two told me was just a fraction of the whole story. What's this? That's Thomas's voice, isn't it? Everyone in the room looked at Aurora, Grace, and Thomas in turn with somber expressions. Aurora stopped the recording and stated firmly, "This is just part of it. I constantly felt danger like this. And Grace, being forced to clean the bathrooms and toilets, helped me on such occasions. Not just this time. She always let me know when he was around. How could she do that?" Grace silently glared at Olivia, then took out her own mobile phone. What? I took your phone away. Olivia, you just said you took it away? I posed the question. In this day and age, even elementary school kids need mobile phones, and you took one from Grace, a middle schooler? Mom, it's part of her education, right? That's right. She doesn't need the latest model. Then at least give her a phone with basic functions. Nowadays, even going out with friends seems to require exchanging messages, and you get news from school too, right? Do you two even pay attention to notices from her school? Huh? I'm busy, you know. Do I look like I have time to attend her school events? What keeps you so busy? Aurora chuckled. What's that, Aurora? Mocking your parent like that. Well, your busy has always been about deceiving men, hasn't it? What? Thomas's gaze turned towards Olivia. Sorry to keep you waiting. John, please come in. Aurora called out loudly. The door opened, revealing a man slightly younger than Thomas and his wife, and another man in a suit. What? Olivia's expression changed drastically. It's been a while, Olivia. I never thought you'd end up in such a place. After all, you cost me everything. What are you doing here? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce John. He's one of the victims this woman swindled money from in the past. Oh, Aurora. You said one, do you mean there are more? I asked Aurora. Yes. This woman always had men coming and going, but John was the most tragic case, even though he was the most decent among them. Since you're here, please tell us everything about this woman. I see. John, what did Olivia do to you? Marriage fraud and theft. The room buzzed at those words. What are you talking about? You gave me that money voluntarily. I was under the impression that we were going to open a store together as a family, that's why I agreed. John glared at Olivia, his gaze filled with contempt. We needed some cash for a deposit on a nice property we had found back then, so I withdrew all my savings and handed the cash to this woman. But the very next day, she disappeared. Is there any proof? Aurora operated her phone and played another audio clip. Come on, let's go. What's this all of a sudden? We've earned plenty of cash from John, so, you know, we need to move to another town quickly. Olivia slammed her hand on the table. How did you even get that? Of course I did. I was always preparing to drag you down to hell. How dare you say such things to your mother? Huh? I can no longer consider you as my mother. You beat me up and skipped my meals just because you thought some guy you'd been dating flirted with me. And this trip, you were planning to set me up with your husband, right? I gave birth to you. I have the right to do whatever I want. Sure, it seems the term child abuse doesn't exist in your world. At that moment, the man behind John stood up. So, you have more hidden crimes, it seems. The man pulled out a police badge. Olivia leaped back in shock upon seeing it. Why are the police here? You really are clueless. John is suing you for fraud and theft. Isn't that right? Yes. Aurora found me and set up this meeting. Olivia, you should give up now. I can testify in any amount of detail of the fraud, theft, and child abuse against me. There are things that you did to me that I can't talk about here. I heard Grace swallow nervously. So that's why Aurora wanted to protect Grace from experiencing what she did. I'll testify about everything that happened to me, no matter how small. It's disgusting to even recall, but if it puts you behind bars, it's worth it. What a strong girl. My son grew up to be an awful man, and he fell for a terrible woman, but I'm glad I got to meet Aurora. After that, the two got divorced. It sounds silly, but it was really when the money ran out that the relationship ended. When Thomas visited Olivia at the police station, they just hurled insults at each other. Yes, Olivia's deeds gradually came to light with the audio data and photos Aurora had been collecting, and more crimes surfaced. The child abuse Aurora suffered was as horrid as the police suspected, so they told me after their interviews. Hearing that, I resolved to do anything I could for Aurora. But she insisted she just needed help finding a job after graduation. So, I decided to arrange an excellent job for her. Thomas was demoted and transferred at once, as the managing director had said. To a regional branch, no less. On top of that, he became a section manager. It seems it was too difficult to demote him from a head of department to a regular employee. So, they placed him where he could do the least harm. In a region he had never been. In the end, it was this land of ours which we had protected that ruined my son. As a mother, all I can hope for is that he becomes somewhat decent in the outside world. Not that I expect much. As for us, the sound of children every day is such a joy. Now, this spacious house is home to me, my granddaughter, and her stepsister. The job I arranged for Aurora is to work alongside Grace, who will eventually inherit this house, serving as her assistant. This way, there is no dependency. If Arya says it's necessary, I'll acquire any qualifications needed. With such a strong girl by her side, I'm confident that Grace's future is secure. However, no matter how resilient Aurora is, there might be times when the past abuse haunts her. For the time being, I'll support these two. I need to remain in good health in order to do so. Thomas became the black sheep of this family because I was reluctant to abandon my own son. And there was also that parasitic woman. From now on, I want these girls, who worked so hard to eliminate them, to enjoy the life that they deserve for their age. Stop leeching off me, you useless thing. For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, Thomas continues. Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right? But... quiet. I don't want to hear your excuses. Thomas raises his voice. Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him. At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 50-year-old housewife, married to Thomas for 25 years. Our son Richard, born a few years into our marriage, graduated from college and started working this year. Now my child-rearing days have come to an end, I can finally do what I want. That's what I'm thinking now. But there's one problem. It's my relationship with Thomas. He is neither a good husband nor a good father. In fact, it's hard to find anything good about him. He cheats, and he doesn't properly contribute to the household expenses. Please, at least bring in enough for the living expenses. Huh? Don't get cocky when you're living off me. That's always his response. Maybe it's hopeless. Should I consider divorce? Lately, I've been thinking about it more and more. But I can't easily bring myself to mention divorce. The truth is, his father, Joseph, who is currently hospitalized and in poor health, entrusted Thomas to my care. I have to be grateful to Joseph and bear it as long as I can. His words can't be ignored. But the desire to divorce is strong. Caught between these conflicting emotions, I find myself reminiscing about happier times before our marriage. The trigger for that past happiness was a misfortune that befell my father, David. My family runs a small eatery. My father was in charge of cooking, and my mother served the customers. Needless to say, the food was delicious. But my father was incredibly bad at business. His dream was to feed delicious food to the customers. As many people as possible. A noble idea, I think. But that was the only thing he focused on in running the eatery. So he doesn't really think about profitability. Profit didn't matter as long as the customers were satisfied. That was his way of doing business. Obviously, it wasn't profitable. Consequently, our family finances were always tight. Nevertheless, as a child, I was proud to see the satisfied customers. So I never interfered with my father's business. However, during my college years, a crisis struck. The company supplying ingredients to our eatery went bankrupt due to unforeseen circumstances. We've already paid this month's bill. If this continues, we might have to close our restaurant. Our situation was already difficult. There was no extra money to spare. Seeing my parents so upset made me anxious, but as a college student, there wasn't much I could do. And it was unlikely that the bankrupt company could refund. Our only option seemed to be closing our eatery. That's when a regular customer of the eatery said, "Closing this eatery? It's too good for that. What a waste. But the company supplying us has gone bankrupt, and now we're in debt. Then let me help you personally, and you can revive the eatery with that." The regular, truly lending the money immediately to my father. "You've saved us. We'll definitely repay you. Don't worry about the money for now. Just keep making delicious meals." Saying that, the man left the shop. Afterward, my father started dealing with a larger food wholesaler, which offered ingredients at a cheaper rate. Fortune seemed to smile upon us, and our family's eatery was saved from bankruptcy. About a year later, I went with my father to return the money to that regular customer. While my father and the man talked, a young man approached me. "It seems you've borrowed money from my father." Listening to him, I learned that he was the son of the man who lent us money. His name is Thomas, and he works for his father's company. "You're beautiful. How about going out with me sometime?" "Me? Go out with you? Why not?" Think of it as a way to say thanks for the loan. It's true that we were helped by the loan. But my father had already properly thanked him. I don't feel obliged to go that far, but as I thought this, Thomas whispered to me, "The daughter of an eatery owner is ungrateful." I could spread that around, you know. But that's... I couldn't talk back. Even if he did spread rumors, I don't think it would harm me. But it could trouble my father. And what would the customers think? With these thoughts, I couldn't refuse his offer. I don't like it, but I'll tolerate it this once. With that thought, I went out with him. But it turned out to be more fun than I expected. He was interesting to talk to, and he knew lots of places to go. The restaurants he chose were all tastefully picked. Despite my initial bad impression, he might be a good person after all. Maybe it was wrong to think that way. I soon found myself being asked out by him. "I have fun when I'm with you." "I have fun too. It is my first time that I can think about marrying. If that was to you who are serious and good girl." Swayed by his simple words, I started a relationship with him, considering marriage. After that, he continued to guide me in various ways. Eventually, a few years later, I found myself married to him. Of course, I never thought at the beginning of our marriage that it was all a trap by him. He seemed genuinely kind, and I felt loved by him. But it was all a lie. As soon as we got married, his attitude changed drastically. "Here, this is my salary for the month. Manage it well." I opened the envelope he handed me. It was a salary statement. The salary itself was transferred to the bank, so it wasn't strange to receive only the statement. What struck me as odd was that the statement was handwritten. Nowadays, it's almost unheard of. But when I got married, 25 years ago, it was a time when personal computers were just becoming widespread, so a handwritten statement wasn't out of place. "There's over $1,000, so it should be enough, right?" I murmured to myself, trying to be convinced. I managed our life with that small amount of money. As our marriage continued, I gradually felt something was off. It was his lifestyle. He left home at a fixed time every morning. But his return was never at a set time. It varied day by day. "I'm busy with various jobs as my father's successor." "Then, could you call before coming home?" "Stop nagging." "All right, I'll call," he shouted. His attitude made me feel even more uneasy. Maybe he's out playing around. Perhaps he even has an affair. I had these thoughts, but I was too scared of his shouting to confront him. In the end, I couldn't say anything, despite my doubts about his behavior. Eventually, our son Richard was born. I thought maybe he'd change a bit with a child. But he remained the same. Looking back, I think that's when I started considering divorce. Then, when Richard was about middle school age, I got a call from my mother while I was out shopping for dinner. "What? Dad's in the hospital." It was news of my father's hospitalization. I rushed to the hospital. "Mom's just exaggerating." My father laughed heartily. I felt relieved. But in that moment, I remembered something and my heart leaped. "Oh no! I forgot to contact Thomas." By then, it was too late. My mobile phone was filled with countless calls from him. When I called back in a hurry, his displeased voice came through. "Where are you? What are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner." "I'm sorry. My father." "Huh? Your father? Your own father?" Thomas asked in a slightly harsh tone. I answered in a small voice. "Yes. He was suddenly hospitalized." "Your father has nothing to do with it. You are my wife." I closed my eyes in fear at his shouting. I'm terrified of his loud voice. But I couldn't just let it go without responding. I braced myself and retorted. "Isn't it natural to worry about one's father? That should be okay, right?" "Shut up. Don't talk back to me." "No, I will say this. You would rush to your own father's side, wouldn't you?" When I asked this, he suddenly fell silent. Putting himself in my shoes must have struck a chord. I thought so, but his reply was beyond my imagination. "Huh? Even if my father was hospitalized, I'd ignore it. After all, I wouldn't be troubled if he wasn't around." I was speechless. This has to be a lie. That's what I thought, but I couldn't deny it. After much hesitation, I had said this to him. "I'm not like you. Sorry, but eat out tonight." That was all I could say, my maximum effort. I hung up the phone, still in a daze. Since that incident, I truly couldn't believe him anymore. It was then that I finally realized that the happy times before our marriage were all an illusion. Ah, I see. He wanted a housekeeper, not a wife. Saying it out loud made me sad. But I couldn't just stay sad. That's right. If I'm going to divorce, I need to prepare. I started to prepare for the divorce. And then, a few years passed. This time, Thomas's father, Joseph, was hospitalized. And his condition was quite serious. He might not be able to leave the hospital, the doctor had said. I relayed Joseph's condition to Thomas. But Thomas remained unbothered. Does it mean it'll cost money? It's not the time to worry about money, don't you understand? I get it. I'll talk to my brother. Thomas contacted his brother James. James is married but doesn't have children. So Thomas suggested to James that he might be able to bear the hospital expenses. Can you pay for it? We have Richard and Elizabeth, and it's tough for us. He spoke as if it was someone else's problem. It reminded me of the time my father was hospitalized. It seemed he really didn't care about Joseph. I couldn't take it anymore. Enough. I'll figure something out and pay for Joseph's hospital bills. Don't forget what you just said, Thomas shouted. I nodded firmly. In the end, my words triggered us taking on the burden of Joseph's hospital expenses. Also, due to his illness, Joseph stepped down from his position as the president. And Thomas took over as the president. Regardless, Thomas didn't like that I had spoken up. Since then, he blatantly stopped coming home. Even when discussing Richard's future plans. Thomas ignored my calls and didn't return home. Dad's not coming home again today. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm causing you trouble. It's okay, I don't care about Dad. But I want to go to a university in Boston. That's right. Don't worry about the tuition, I'll manage it somehow. Soon after, Richard's enrollment in a Boston university was confirmed. Naturally, Thomas didn't see Richard off. Once Richard moved to Boston, the house suddenly became quiet. By then, Thomas was only coming home about once a week. There's also Joseph's hospital fees, could you transfer a bit more? Huh? I've already transferred over half of my salary. It should be enough for you alone. The amount Thomas transferred was just a little money. Clearly, it was only a fraction of his salary. Saying over half was definitely a lie. I knew that. But I didn't have the energy to complain. Years passed, and I received news that Richard had found a job. Richard has got a job now, it's probably a good time to talk about divorce. In these years, I had prepared for the divorce. It was just a matter of timing. When and where should I say it to avoid any trouble? Such thoughts constantly occupied my mind. It's not even about not wanting to cause a scene. I laughed at myself sarcastically. Then one day, I had been to visit Joseph. After chatting with Joseph as usual, I returned home. Reaching the entrance, I was startled. For some reason, the front door was unlocked. Could it be a burglar? Tentatively, I peeked inside the house. Then I heard the sound of the TV and Thomas's laughter coming from the living room. So Thomas was home. Relieved, I entered the living room. There, Thomas was watching TV, laughing loudly. You were home. Yeah, I thought I'd tidy up the house a bit. Tidy up? His words made me look around. On closer inspection, some items in the room were missing. Wait, it looks like some things are missing. Yeah, I threw them out. Your stuff. Threw out? My things? Shocked, I hurried back to my room. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, not even my favorite cup. Even the bed was gone. What's the meaning of this? I don't need them anymore, so I threw them out. Don't need them? What am I supposed to do now? I shouted, and Thomas frowned. Then he looked away and sighed. I guess. I'm tired of supporting you? What are you saying? I'm your wife. I retorted, and Thomas seemed irritated. He suddenly raised his voice. Do I have to spell it out? Stop leeching off me, you useless thing. For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, he continues. Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right? But... Quiet! I don't want to hear your excuses. He raises his voice. Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him. At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. What? Got a complaint? None. If you want me out, then I'll leave as you wish. I slammed the living room door shut, heading to my room. But there was nothing of mine left. Don't bother looking. I had the garbage collectors take everything away. Which company did you use? The flyer is right there. That's the one. I picked up the collector's flyer from the floor. As I called the number, I told him, "I'll make sure you regret this." Saying that, I left the house. Soon the call connected. I explained the situation, and they understood immediately. Apparently, they had sensed something off about his behavior. The garbage collectors had kept everything as it was when they picked it up. "I'll be there shortly. Thank you." I thanked them politely and hung up. Afterward, I visited the collector's location. I expressed my gratitude and had them move my belongings to a newly rented storage unit. I was relieved to find my belongings safe. He shouldn't think I'll just let this go. Grinding my teeth, I called Richard. I briefly explained the situation and then said, "So, I've decided to move out, considering a divorce. Richard, prepare yourself, okay?" "Oh, okay. Bye." Richard quickly ended the call. He seemed scared of me. Was I that angry? I wondered, storing my mobile phone in my bag. Then I headed to a nearby business hotel. Actually, I had already decided where to move. The reason was simple. I was planning to discuss divorce with Thomas soon. Divorce and then move there. That was my plan for starting a new life. Well, it's just a bit earlier than planned. Honestly, I wasn't in trouble. It was just moving things forward by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a hotel. What a waste. Can't be helped. But as a housewife, I couldn't help but think it wasteful. Maybe I should bill him for this hotel stay? Well, whatever it is, brace yourself, Thomas. I muttered and then started working on my post-divorce plans. About 10 days into my stay at the business hotel, Thomas called me during lunch. As soon as I answered, Thomas raised his voice. "You took my money." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called asking for payment." "Oh, that's what he's talking about." I sighed as I replied, "You should be the one paying, shouldn't you? I'm no longer related to this, having been kicked out. You've been receiving living expenses from me. It should have been paid from there." "Yes, that's true. But isn't the debit card for that bank account with you now?" I retorted calmly. However, I knew there was no money in that bank account. That's why I couldn't stop laughing. "I have the debit card, but there's no money in it. That's why I'm saying you took it." "I didn't take anything." "Don't lie. Who else could use it?" Didn't he realize that he had transferred too little? I replied in disbelief. "It was just too little money from the start. If there's no money for the hospital bills, why not use your own allowance?" "Allowance?" He started to panic, visibly confused. It seemed he thought I was unaware. Since the beginning of our marriage, he had been giving me handwritten salary statements. It was to hide the fact that he was siphoning off a portion of his salary. In other words, the skimmed money was his allowance. I once asked Joseph about your salary. "How much is Thomas earning?" "So, that's..." He looked puzzled but told me. So, I knew about the skimmed money. As I told him, he fell silent. There was a long silence, making me wonder if the call had dropped. Then suddenly, he raised his voice. "What's wrong with using the money I earned? It's your fault for using up the money I gave you." "Okay. So? We're getting divorced." I'm going to demand compensation. You'll pay back the money you spent." At that, I sneered. Perfect timing, I had evidence. Now Thomas couldn't escape the truth. I responded with a smile. "Oh, thank you. I wanted to get divorced too. Come to my place for the divorce discussion." "What?" "No, but you want to divorce, right? I've prepared evidence of your affair and am waiting." Though I couldn't see him, his voice sounded strained. "Evidence of an affair? What are you talking about?" "No use pretending. I have the evidence photos." "Evidence photos?" I could almost see him getting pale. Suppressing my laughter, I continued. "Then, I'll give you the address. Let's meet next Sunday to discuss in detail." I gave him the address of a certain location and quickly ended the call. I had successfully set up the divorce confrontation. Now, if only I could make him apologize. Honestly, that would be the trickiest part. I steeled myself for the upcoming meeting. On the promised Sunday. I was already at the meeting place before the scheduled time. I wondered when he would arrive. Looking around, I spotted Thomas in the corner of my eye. "Over here!" I waved and called out. He looked up, surprised. "Here?" "Yes. Didn't I give you the address?" "But, this place, whose mansion is it?" Thomas looked behind me. There stood a mansion worth about $1 million. Much larger than a normal house, with a garden. A 3-story building with a basement and a theater room. Luxury cars parked in the built-in garage. Pointing at the mansion, I said with a smile. "This is my house. It's newly built, so it's beautiful, right?" "Your house?" "Yes. I thought I'd live here after the divorce, so I started building it a while ago." Yes, the place I had called him to was my newly built house. Thomas, thinking of me as just a housewife, was understandably shocked. Pushing him from the back, I led him into the house. I guided him to the living room. "Let's start our discussion. This is my lawyer." I introduced my waiting lawyer. But Thomas was too distracted. Restless, his gaze never settled. He kept looking around, not even trying to see the evidence photos of his affair on the table. Also, he didn't respond when spoken to. Frankly, the discussion was unproductive. Eventually, he asked in a quiet mutter. "How did you afford this house?" While thinking, "Is that what you're curious about?" I answered. "I just bought it, normally." "Liar! A housewife can't afford to buy a house." It's said that to buy a $1 million house, one needs an income of around $150,000 per year. But I have that kind of income. So, I answered calmly. "I earn that much. Do you have a problem with that?" "No, but how?" "I started helping out at a friend's company, and before I knew it, things turned out like this." The story goes back a few years. When I decided to divorce during my father's hospitalization turmoil, I started preparing for it. The first thing I did was look for a job. I wouldn't be able to live without a job after the divorce. So, I searched for a job to sustain myself. But good jobs aren't easy to find. That's when I consulted my close friend Linda. "Why don't you help me out with my work?" "What kind of work do you do?" "Aquaculture on land." Land-based aquaculture involves artificially creating facilities like pools for farming. There are downsides, of course, but it prevents ocean pollution. It's an eco-friendly type of farming. Linda's father started it, and now Linda had taken over. "So, you had been working there?" Thomas asked tentatively. "After I started helping, the business began to thrive. I was mainly involved in negotiations and administrative work. Linda was grateful for my help, and eventually, I was promoted to an executive position. It was all coincidental, but I believe luck is part of one's capabilities." Hearing my story, he looked dejected. Then, after a moment of thought, he suddenly looked up. "Okay. Let's pretend this divorce talk never happened. How about we start over? As he spoke nonsense, I coldly replied, Are you crazy? No, I genuinely want to start over with you. Thomas pleaded fervently. But seeing that he was only dazzled by my money, I retorted with a raised eyebrow. I refuse to be with someone who cheats. And someone who neglects Joseph. No, about my father. Enough. You don't know, but I was the one paying for Joseph's hospital bills. The money Thomas gave me was really just a little. After paying for food, utilities, and other expenses, there was usually nothing left, sometimes not even enough. He only gave me that much. Obviously, there was no way to pay Joseph's hospital bills with it. At first, I managed somehow, but later I paid them with my salary. And yet, you never listened to me or visited Joseph. Well, that's because I can't trust someone like that. I raised my voice, and he fell silent. Then, the lawyer discussed the compensation. Thomas couldn't say anything. He just kept his head down until the end. Eventually, prompted by the lawyer, Thomas signed the divorce papers. The compensation was set at $30,000. So, now that the divorce is settled, you'll pay Joseph's hospital bills. Ah. Thomas nodded reluctantly. At least he didn't argue. I felt relieved. Finally, I sent him away, as if chasing him out. It's over at last. The only regret was that he never apologized. But I had one last card to play. If I played it, he would apologize. Thinking that, a smile crept onto my face. A few days later, after leaving the company, someone called out to me from behind. Hey, Elizabeth! Turning around, I saw Thomas standing there. Don't address me so familiarly. We're divorced. Shut up! What did you do? He looked at me with an angry, red face. His reaction told me everything. Ah, he must have heard that news at the company. I smiled and responded. What do you think I did? Don't joke around. Tell me how you got me fired. He stomped his foot. His frustration amused me, and a smile escaped. Isn't it your own fault? Getting punished for having an affair with the office clerk? His affair partner was a clerk at his company. Apparently, he did whatever he wanted because he was the president. After deciding to divorce, I reported the matter to Joseph. While Joseph regretted our divorce, he was furious about Thomas's actions. When I showed him the affair evidence photos, Joseph became even more angry. Then he said to me, I want to transfer all my company shares to you. To me? What about Thomas's brother? No, to you. Use them to dethrone Thomas from his position as president. That was Joseph's plan. His company is a corporation. For a president or any executive appointment, a shareholders' meeting resolution is necessary. Of course, it can also be decided by a board of directors resolution. However, Joseph's company isn't very large. He holds most of the issued shares. This means that as a shareholder, he could make decisions alone. But it's common for small company presidents to hold the majority of shares. If I inherited all of Joseph's shares, I could exercise the voting rights alone. Nevertheless, Thomas's dismissal wasn't my decision. I informed James about acquiring the shares. And only reported Thomas's affair. The rest was up to James' judgment. James was considerate. James, huh? Why would he do whatever you say? It's not about following my orders. It's about doing what's best for the company. As I said this, Thomas collapsed on the spot. Then, he began to mutter apologies. I was wrong. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I won't. If things stay this way, I'll have no job and be left destitute. That's not my concern. It's all his responsibility. I won't forgive you even if you apologize. Please! Forgive me! I'm begging you! He apologized profoundly right there. I turned my back. Sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Why not? If you own the shares. I sold them to James and his wife. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." At that moment, I heard his sobbing. Of course, I pretended not to hear and walked away. After his dismissal as president, Thomas had to leave the company. He might have stayed if he had been an employee or a working director. But Thomas was arrogant, having joined the company through Joseph's referral. I refused to be an employee. He even said that. So, when he was dismissed, he was kicked out immediately. Now he's working a part-time job at a grocery store, but re-employment at his age is difficult. He's likely to spend his old age in regret and without money. As for me, being divorced allowed me to focus more on my work. There's no talk of remarriage, but I have a few male colleagues. Spring might come again for me. I was thinking about this when Richard called. "I'll bring my girlfriend over sometime." "That's great. I'm looking forward to it. I failed in marriage, but I don't want Richard to. But I'm sure he'll be fine. Richard is much more sensible than me."
"This is our castle now. Ha 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 ha."
"Can the penniless old lady please leave? She's in the way." That's what my brother and his wife said, trying to kick us out. I was completely appalled by my brother's ingratitude after letting him have his way for so long. "Mom will live with me. I won't let her see you ever again, no matter what happens." When I said that, my brother and his wife laughed triumphantly. Even as I sat in the driver's seat and put Mom in my car, my anger towards them lingered. Then, my mom, smiling gently, looked at me in the rear-view mirror and said, "That child is finished." I'm Alice, a 28-year-old office worker. Since graduating from college, I've been living on my own. I used to dream about living alone, and starting a new life was exciting at first. But being away from home made me really appreciate my parents, and I started to miss them. So, I often returned home to see Mom and Dad.
"Back again?"
they would say, but I could tell they were happy to see their daughter. Even after becoming a company employee, I visited them often, realizing how much they had aged. Dad, who used to be so active, started moving more slowly after turning 60. And Mom's taste in clothes had changed, but their relationship was still strong, and I hope to have a marriage like theirs someday. Well, I'm at the right age for marriage now, but I haven't found someone yet. Mom keeps saying, "I hope you find someone nice soon," it is said, but I'm not in a hurry. I think it's okay if I marry in my 30s. For now, I'm focused on my career and studying for qualifications for a promotion. Visiting home is a great way for me to relax. But then, something unexpected happened. It was during work, when I got a sudden call from Mom. She never calls during work, so I had a bad feeling. I answered the phone quickly, and Mom's voice was trembling. "Dad has collapsed!" "What?" According to Mom, Dad collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital. I rushed out of work and headed to the hospital. When I got to his room, Dad, lying in bed, sat up.
Alice, you came."
"Dad, are you okay?"
"Yeah, it wasn't serious. Sorry to worry you."
"No, as long as you're okay." I went to the hospital lounge with Mom to calm down and asked about Dad's condition. "Is Dad seriously ill?" Dad always tries to hide his worries from me, so I always ask Mom for the truth. But this time it seemed it wasn't that serious. He fainted from anemia and fell, hitting his head on the desk. They did a thorough check just to be sure. I see. I was relieved to hear Mom's explanation, but Dad was clearly getting older, nearing retirement. Should I move back home? What? What if Dad needs care? It'll be too much for you alone. Alice, thank you, but I'm still fit. Okay, but don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. Yes, thank you. After that, I started visiting home after work to check on Dad. One day while having dinner with my parents, they brought up something. Warren contacted us. Warren? My brother? Why? I had a bad feeling. My brother had always been self-centered, causing trouble for our parents. After graduating from beauty school, he left home to work, but he hadn't returned or contacted us in over 10 years. So, a sudden contact from him must mean something serious. Maybe he's asking for money. But what Mom told me was surprising. He's getting married and wants us to come to a family meeting. Married? Mom nodded, looking a bit happy. I was worried since he hadn't contacted us for so long, but he must have found a job and a partner.
Of course. He's 30 now. He should be responsible as a company employee.
Dad, hearing that my brother had straightened out, seemed happy too. I'm really glad. When is he coming to say hello? He's coming the day after tomorrow, on Sunday. Alice, would you come too? What? It's been 10 years and I'm nervous about the family meeting. Okay, I'll come. And so I was set to meet my brother after a long time. On the day my parents, unable to hide their excitement, waited with me for my brother and his fiancée. Then the doorbell rang and they arrived.
It's been a while, Dad. Mom?
Warren, it's been so long. Come in, please. After 10 years, the reunion seemed to make my parents very happy. Long time no see, big brother.
Oh, Alice, you've really grown up.
Well, I'm 28 now. My brother seemed much more settled than before, with none of his old roughness, and next to him stood a beautiful woman.
Let me introduce everyone. This is my fiancé, Casey.
Nice to meet you. I'm Casey. Casey greeted us politely. My parents and I hurriedly returned the greeting. Then we sat in the living room talking while having drinks. My brother had changed so much from his old self. In high school, he used to dye his hair flashy colors, act frivolously, and often skip school. He was even suspended, and he would come home early in the morning, causing Mom and Dad to constantly scold him. There were times he stole, and our parents had to apologize to the store. Back then, he was rebellious and never listened, no matter how much our parents scolded him. Even when he went to vocational school, he would come home late, always reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. I didn't like my brother back then, and was honestly relieved when he left home after graduating. But it seems people change over 10 years. His fiancée seemed like a good person, and I was happy for my brother's marriage. Learning that Dad's health was deteriorating, my brother proposed living together with our parents after his marriage. We were surprised by the sudden offer, but looking at his gentle smile, Mom cried. Thank you, Warren. Dad, too, though not crying, seemed happy. We're still okay for now, but if it gets too hard, just the two of us, we'll ask for your help. The family meeting ended in a warm and friendly atmosphere. Even my brother and his wife left. Mom and Dad seemed happy. I felt happy too, as if our family had finally come together. Later, my brother and Casey's wedding went off without a hitch, and life returned to normal. After the meeting, my brother kept in regular touch with our parents. It was comforting to know he was looking out for them. If anything happens to Mom or Dad, we siblings could help each other. About a year later, Mom hurt her leg and ended up in a wheelchair. I was shocked. I hadn't expected her to be the first to need serious care. Dad wasn't in great health, and now Mom needed care too. I immediately discussed it with my brother.
Don't worry, Casey and I will live with them at home,
he said. Casey agreed and was cooperative. I trusted my brother, given his recent behavior, and since I couldn't be there during the day because of work, I left the care to them. After that, I reduced the frequency of my visits to not bother my brother and his wife and our parents. Even if Casey, now my sister-in-law, didn't mind, it would be polite not to intrude too often. Even if they were not close, they would certainly be concerned. So I started visiting every 2 or 3 months. But during these infrequent visits, I noticed my parents seemed less energetic. Both of them are visibly aging rapidly. Maybe it's normal to age quickly as you get older, but this seems abnormally fast. It's as if they're under constant stress every day. When my brother and his wife stepped out, I asked, "Is something bothering you?" But neither mom nor dad would say anything. They both tend to keep things to themselves, which really worries me. So, I started visiting home frequently without hesitation. Each time, Casey and my brother looked annoyed.
We're here, so you don't need to come so often.
"It bothers us when you come," added Casey. "Don't worry about me. Just carry on as you usually would," I firmly said. I started visiting almost every weekend, sometimes staying overnight. Then one day, when I went to my parents' house, my brother suddenly yelled at me.
Enough is enough. We're living here now. Stop coming back so frequently.
His way of yelling reminded me of his rough past. "Hey, don't tell me you're treating dad and mom like this too."
I'm not. They don't make me angry like you do.
His response felt off to me. It was as if he thought he was the most important person in the house, and Casey was glaring at me too. "Honestly, you have no common sense. Is that why you can't get married?" I was angered by Casey's provocative words. "Are you properly taking care of mom? Doing your share of the housework?" When I asked Casey, she opened her eyes wide in anger. "What? Haven't you seen me cleaning and taking care of her when you're here?" Indeed, she seemed to be doing so, but after half a year, her housework and caregiving still seemed inadequate. I wondered if she only did it when I was around and neglected it otherwise. Feeling sorry for my parents, I decided to take drastic measures. I installed a hidden camera in mom's room to see how Casey and my brother behaved when I wasn't there. I was shocked when I saw the footage. Casey hardly ever went to mom's room. Surprisingly, mom was using a urinal in her room, probably because Casey wasn't helping her during the day. She had to fend for herself. I felt dizzy just watching the footage. Mom was being fed carelessly, and only when she needed the toilet for bowel movements did Casey reluctantly assist her in her wheelchair. At night, Dad, returning from work, would take over the caregiving. Just one day's footage told me everything about my parents' situation. I immediately contacted Dad. "Dad, tell me the truth. Things are a mess at home because of them, right?"
Why would you say that all of a sudden?
I honestly told him about the hidden camera. He was shocked.
Wait a minute. I didn't know Mom was going through this during the day.
Apparently, Dad was asked to help only at night, after returning from work. Casey seemed to be careless with housework, and Dad thought my comments were about that. He had been told by my brother and Casey that they were taking good care of Mom, never suspecting they were neglecting her. I went to my parents' house and confronted my brother and his wife with Dad. They defiantly responded,
"She's not dead, so it's fine."
"You're overreacting." Dad became furious before I could.
Don't joke around. Before she's your mom, she's my precious wife. I won't let you hurt her anymore. Get out of here now.
My brother and his wife were shocked by Dad's intense anger. They protested about being asked to leave immediately, but Dad was unyielding. Eventually, they left begrudgingly. They probably wanted to live in the family home to save on rent and live comfortably. My brother likely told Casey it was okay to care for our parents carelessly, changing their appearance to seem responsible, and then taking advantage of us like this was despicable. Dad and I immediately apologized to Mom. Mom said, "It's okay. I should have spoken up sooner." Then she apologized to us. After that, we changed the locks so my brother and his wife couldn't enter, and I moved back home. Dad and I shared the care for Mom, and we lived happily together. But then, Dad suffered a heart attack and passed away. Mom was devastated by Dad's loss. I couldn't stop crying either. But, with funeral arrangements to make, I couldn't afford to cry forever. I bravely handled the funeral preparations by myself. Many people admired Dad, so the funeral was well attended. Regrettably, my brother and his wife also came, since they're family, but my brother had returned to his flashy hair color, and Casey was also dressed and made up flashily. Probably, now they didn't have to please our parents. They reverted to their true selves. I tried to avoid them as much as possible, but after the funeral, a lawyer opened Dad's will, so I had to reluctantly have my brother and his wife attend. My brother said,
I bet it's just complaints about me, but I'll make sure to get my share of the inheritance.
He looked bored. But when the lawyer read Dad's will, we were all shocked. It contained a surprise. It stated that Mom and I would each get half of Dad's savings and my brother would inherit the family home. It's a large and objectively nice house. My brother and his wife were surprised to inherit it. They quickly became overjoyed and childish.
Ha! Is this for real? The house is ours now?
I can't believe our initial plan worked out like this!
Let's move in right away. Hey, you guys, get out fast. Ha! This is our castle now.
Can the penniless old lady please leave? She's in the way. So, my ungrateful brother and his wife, having had their way for so long, tried to kick us out. I was utterly disgusted by their attitude. But why did Dad leave the house to my brother? Despite everything, was the bond of father and son still important to him? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Let's go back and pack up, Alice. Warren and his wife will probably come soon. Okay. Indeed, my brother and his wife would likely come to the house at their convenience and force us out. Mom and I quickly contracted a barrier-free condominium and prepared to move. A few days later, my brother and his wife did come.
Are you still here?
Get out quickly! While I was disgusted by their selfish attitude, I calmly dealt with the situation. Mom will live with me. I won't let her see you ever again, no matter what happens. As I said this, my brother and his wife laughed triumphantly.
We don't want to see her anyway.
Getting rid of the nuisance and getting this house is the best! I didn't want to see their despicable smiling faces anymore, so I took the remaining belongings and left the house. Even as I sat in the driver's seat and put Mom in the car, my anger towards them lingered. Why did Dad grant such a favor to my brother? Then Mom, smiling gently, looked at me in the rear-view mirror and said, That child is finished. What do you mean? That house was quite expensive at the time, so there's still about 20 years of mortgage payments left. What? Warren doesn't seem to work much, so I doubt he can manage the mortgage payments. Besides, the house's value has dropped significantly, so even if they sell it, it won't cover the mortgage, and they'll end up with a considerable debt. Hearing this, everything made sense to me. So, Dad, he probably foresaw this and intentionally left the house to Warren as a form of revenge. It turned out to be Dad's way of getting back at my brother. Dad left only the house to my brother as his inheritance. He passed on the rest of the savings and assets to Mom and me. Effectively, my brother inherited nothing but debt. A month later, my brother contacted me.
Hey, let me see Mom.
Huh? Didn't you say you didn't need to see her anymore?
It's an emergency.
About the house's mortgage, maybe?
How did you know?
Mom told me. There's still 20 years of mortgage left. But you guys chose to inherit and live in that house, so there's nothing we can do.
Don't joke. If I knew about the mortgage, I would have refused.
It's too late now, and it's all your own doing. After all the horrible things you did to Mom, do you really think Dad would forgive you? You thought too conveniently. You might as well suffer in your dead hell. I said that and hung up the phone. Thus, my brother and his wife were burdened with debt and had to live a poor life in a large house. As for Mom and me, thanks to Dad's considerable savings, Mom's investments over the years, and my substantial earnings from work, we were honestly quite wealthy. It looks like my retirement is secure. So, I quit my job and transitioned to a life of investment. Now I'm caring for Mom and living a relaxed life with her. I'm thinking of finding a new hobby and enjoying life from now on.
My name is Nina. Recently, I found a kitten near my house, and it's so adorable that I, a 35-year-old, am completely smitten. Why do small things have such a purifying effect on the heart? I used to be surprised when celebrities on TV said they loved sucking on cats' ears, but now I sort of understand that feeling. Well, enough about being captivated by a cat. What I'm going to talk about is the story of my ex-husband Ralph being captivated by another woman. Please listen to this. It was 6 years ago. I was in my second year of marriage with Ralph and was just getting used to being a wife. Things were going smoothly, but it was around this time that it started. Ralph began coming home later and later. There were various reasons for his late returns. Sometimes it was simply overtime, helping a junior colleague with a mistake, or attending business dinners. However, Ralph's job doesn't usually involve much overtime, and not many newcomers join his workplace. Entertaining clients is more of a task for higher-level bosses. It's unlikely for someone in his position to have daily overtime for these reasons. The cause must be one of the following. Number 1, a monster newbie who makes unbelievable mistakes every day has joined. Number 2, he is doing something he can't tell his wife about. If it's not number 1, then it's number 2. Naturally, I found it suspicious, but there was no concrete evidence to support my suspicions. Above all, I didn't want to face the reality myself. The thought of infidelity in just a second year of marriage was sad, and I blamed myself for not being good enough. Amidst these unsettling days, another problem troubled me. The presence of my mother-in-law, Natasha. She used to be calm and kind, but a little before our second anniversary, she started pressuring us about having children. She would regularly contact us, suggesting supplements for fertility or wearing a 4-leaf clover, pushing her beliefs about health and spirituality. She even once came over, leaving behind 10 fertility charms and a stork figurine. Or she would suddenly take me to some dubious massage parlor, claiming it was good for balancing hormones, assuming mine were off balance. We were just in our second year of marriage, and I'm still young. There's no need to rush into having children out of desperation. I'd rather spend more time just with Ralph. I think it's okay to wait a bit longer before having children. But of course, I couldn't say this to Natasha. If I did, she'd get sentimental saying, "Am I going to leave this world without ever meeting my grandchildren?" She seems healthy enough for at least another 30 years, doesn't she? So I had to play the role of a wife wanting children around Natasha. No, I do want them in the long term. It's just that saying this won't make any difference to Natasha. I've talked to Ralph about it, of course. Ralph says, "If Mom wants it, we better hurry." But his actions don't follow his words. His routine has become coming home late, immediately taking a bath, eating, and then going straight to sleep. Where's the opportunity to make a child in such a routine? Even observing his behavior, I don't think Ralph genuinely wants a child that much. But Ralph, he tends to be completely obedient to Natasha, almost subservient. Even our current house, despite our tight finances, we bought a single-family home because Natasha once said, "If I were to live with you two in the future, it should be in a house." Even though he was adamant about an apartment before because of the financial strain. So probably regarding a child, he's more interested in fulfilling Natasha's wishes than his own. If I were to get pregnant in such circumstances, I can clearly see that I wouldn't get much help from Ralph, and I'd have to handle everything alone. It was not a good environment to welcome a child. While skillfully dodging Natasha's persistent questions and struggling with my unresponsive husband Ralph, a certain day came. I noticed the scent of a woman's perfume on Ralph's shirt when he returned home. Of course I asked, "You smell nice. What's that about?" I knew better than to accuse him outright. Just a scent wasn't enough evidence. As expected, Ralph replied harmlessly, "Maybe it's from the accounting clerk. I pointed out a mistake in her expense report today." His face was clearly pale, though. His behavior became increasingly suspicious, constantly checking his phone, even taking it to the bathroom and shower, and now this scent on his shirt. I desperately wanted to get things clear. It was scary to know the truth, but I needed evidence. And just when I was starting to feel this way, he beat me to it. "Who is she?" Ralph came home early for once, with a woman. He awkwardly avoided my gaze, and the woman with a smug smile said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Catherine, Ralph's junior at work." She introduced herself as Catherine, intertwining her arm with Ralph's. "She's pregnant. I want a divorce." "What?" Ralph's request for divorce left me in disbelief. Pregnant? An affair, and now a child with another woman, while we don't have any children? How? Why a divorce? We've only been married for 2 years. Is she really pregnant? "It's true. I've been seeing Catherine for about 6 months. She's carrying my child. Even Mom knows and is happy about her grandchild. She said it's better if I divorce you. I think I'll follow her advice." "Wait, what? This doesn't make sense." "I'll pay alimony. Just name your price. Please, let's get divorced." I felt so sad when Ralph apologized deeply, wanting to leave me so desperately. Suddenly being confronted with his infidelity, and that he had a child on the way. Even as we discussed alimony, I couldn't grasp the situation. I was too confused to even feel angry, and we ended up getting divorced. Maybe I should have scolded him more when we parted ways. 2 years have passed since then. After leaving the house I shared with Ralph, I moved back to my parents' place, as I didn't have much savings, working as a temporary worker. My colleagues at the temp job were very kind, and during one of those peaceful days, I ran into Ralph and Catherine at a restaurant while out for lunch with a coworker. I wanted to ignore them, but Catherine, holding a baby, approached me saying, "Oh, isn't that Nina?" My colleagues, hearing this, asked who they were, and I couldn't escape. "He's my ex-husband and his wife," I replied. My colleagues who knew about my divorce immediately realized Catherine was the other woman, and showed clear sympathy. "Isn't that Catherine?" my colleague Lily said, and Catherine's expression stiffened. "Lily, long time no see. What a coincidence." So you're the reason Nina got divorced." "What? Anything wrong?" "No, just wondering." Lily smiled, and Catherine seemed uneasy. We all watched them with curious eyes. "I'm going to the restroom. Please excuse me," Catherine said, leaving the baby with Ralph and quickly heading towards the restroom. Lily stared after her intently. Curious, I asked, "Lily, is there something about her that bothers you?" Well, I don't know if you want to hear this, but maybe you should consider a DNA test for that baby." "What?" I blurted out, mirroring Ralph's reaction. What was this about? "The last place I was assigned to? It was the same workplace as Catherine. She's been involved with several married men, and has been fired from many places because of that. She seems to have a thing for other people's partners," Lily said with a cold gaze. "I heard you met Catherine at your company, didn't you? If you can, you should check her resume. She hopped through a lot of jobs, and it's all because of affairs with men." "But that's got nothing to do with the kid," Ralph argued. "Well, yes, but she's known for juggling multiple relationships at once. Believing you were the only one she loved might be risky," Lily said, almost indifferent. It was like watching a celebrity scandal to her, laughing it off lightly while advising Ralph. Meanwhile, Ralph, pale-faced, kept staring at the after-image of Catherine, who had gone to the bathroom. About 3 weeks later, Ralph called my parents' house. Since I had blocked his number on my mobile phone, he had no choice but to call there. When I picked up, Ralph immediately started apologizing. "I got suspicious after what your colleague said and checked the baby's paternity. It's not mine." Ralph's voice faded, but at this point, I couldn't care less. He was like an old, unwanted husband to me. I'm more interested in cats than human men. When did I start neglecting you? Even then you loved me," Ralph said. No. If I had found the evidence of your cheating first, it would have been over, even for me. We were both fools, weren't we? The child I thought was mine isn't mine, but Mom thinks it's her grandchild. Don't you feel sorry? I can't bear to keep this truth from her. You must feel bad too, about your ex-mother-in-law suffering like this. No, I feel more like laughing. It's funny. After all, she's the one who encouraged you to leave me for someone who's pregnant, right? You understand what I'm feeling, right? What, are you hungry or something? No. Don't you understand why I called you just to hear your voice? I don't understand, and I don't want to understand. If I receive radio waves that can read your heart, I'll probably go astray. I can't catch it, okay? Listen carefully. I still love you. Let's have a child together. Ew. I couldn't help but express my disgust. I felt a chill, imagining Ralph thinking, she'll surely agree now. How can he think I'd fall for him after being discarded like that? This man, practically worthless in the market, and such a creepy way to woo someone. It's almost reportable. Right after the divorce, I was disoriented and sad, sure. But now, I often think it was good that we split. What makes him think such a frivolous thought? If you respond to my feelings, I'll leave Catherine and start a new rosy life with you. Huh? So if I don't respond, he'll just go back to Catherine like nothing happened? Playing it safe, huh? But in a way, this was an opportunity, so I responded to Ralph. You'll treasure me, huh? Well, then you'll have to declare your divorce to Catherine, won't you? You'll respond to my feelings? Thank you. I understand. I'll arrange a day to meet Catherine. Come to my house. Ralph, overjoyed, quickly arranged a meeting. 2 days later, I met Ralph and we headed to the house where he lived with Catherine. Seeing Catherine's startled face upon seeing Ralph. Why, Nina! I understand that feeling. I was just as stunned the day I was declared divorced. Nodding in agreement, I thought deeply. Catherine, I've looked into your past relationships, and I found out Marty isn't my son, so I can't live with you anymore. What? Marty was the son of Catherine and Ralph. Catherine was terribly upset by Ralph's sudden declaration. Wait, why are you saying this all of a sudden? Marty is your son. Weren't you going to go out with a senior at work around that time? Besides me? That was just, I was invited. He was my boss. I didn't do anything. No need for excuses now. You've deceived me, and you'll pay for it. I'll file for divorce and demand compensation. Don't decide everything on your own. I've already decided. I'm going to settle things with you and start over with Nina. I'll give Mom the grandchild she deserves. What's that? Natasha is more important to you than me? Of course. I almost burst out laughing. It seems Catherine still doesn't know Ralph's true nature. There's a lot I want to say, but patience for now. Is that okay with you, Nina? Getting back with a man who betrayed you? You're too convenient. I value my happiness. I replied to Catherine's furious accusation with a calm smile. Probably the same smile Catherine had when she took Ralph from me that day. Unbelievable. Are you serious? Catherine panicked. Your complaints are pointless. We've decided to get back together, Catherine, so no complaining. You're the worst. Fine then. I'll divorce you. I'll take every penny I can get from you. What? Compensation? You won't get a dime. You're the one at fault. Ralph snorted at Catherine. Knowing he could marry me gave him confidence. That's because... Catherine tried to argue. Nina. Catherine and Ralph were surprised by my sudden laughter. I couldn't help but laugh at such an amusing scene. Catherine, you still don't know everything. Once you find out everything, you'll think you're lucky to get divorced. What do you mean? Catherine looked perplexed by my words. Ever seen the inside of his mobile phone case? Huh? Catherine looked confused while Ralph turned pale. I turned to Ralph. Show me your phone, with a smile. I don't want to. Why not? Are you embarrassed? Did you feel that way? Or did you think I hadn't noticed?
Shut up. It's not embarrassing. It's a picture of Mom. What's wrong with that?
What? At Ralph's exclamation, Catherine looked at him with cold eyes. What do you mean? There's a picture of his mom inside his phone case? Natasha's picture inside his mobile phone case? That's right. I smiled at Catherine's question. Seriously? That's unbelievable. Catherine twisted in disgust. It's not just the phone case. Check under the mattress in the bedroom. If it's the same as before, there should be a picture of Natasha hidden there. He used to stare at it under the phone light after I went to bed or in the middle of the night. Ah, it was scary. Yikes! Catherine, who let out a scream, ran to the bedroom and after a short shriek, came back to the entrance. It was really there. See? Ralph stared at our exchange with a stunned face.
No, parents are important. You guys hang up photos too, right?
Ralph yelled. There's a difference between hanging and carrying them around. Right, Catherine agreed with my comment, clearly on my side now. Catherine is now completely on our side. Catherine, you probably don't know, but sometimes this guy talks in his sleep, like, Mommy, let me sit on your lap. That's why I realized it was good to have divorced him. At first, I just thought he was a bit quirky, the first of his kind I had ever met. But once I was away, I realized what a real mama's boy he was. I was the empress of the mama's boy empire, and now you're the current empress. All hail the emperor! Ugh! Catherine's look of physical revulsion made Ralph's face turn red.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Unlike you, my mom is perfect. She's like a goddess to me.
Right. The authority of the mama's boy emperor bestowed by a goddess. Catherine burst into laughter at my calm retort.
What are you saying? I won't tolerate anyone who wants to marry me making fun of Mom. Kneel and apologize.
Marry? No thanks.
What?
Ralph and Catherine were both surprised. It seemed they both really thought I was going to get back with Ralph. Well, I had acted like it. They would have been troubled if they hadn't believed it. I never said anything about getting back together. Didn't you notice? I just came to expose your mama's boy tendencies. Also, I thought if Ralph was going to end things with Catherine anyway, I might as well make a big scene. When we divorced, I was too stunned to say anything. Taking this chance to get a little revenge wouldn't bring down divine punishment, right?
You're the worst. I trusted you.
Worst? Who? Where? You were the one who had a child with another woman and decided to divorce me because Mom wanted a grandchild. Who's the worst now? Don't underestimate women. Think dangling marriage will make us swoon? You're now an emperor abandoned by his empress, you failure.
Who's a failure?
Sorry, my mistake. You're a mama's boy monster.
Forget it. I won't check back with you. I'd rather continue my marriage with Catherine than that.
As if I had any intention of getting back together. What nonsense, I thought. Just as I was about to voice my disbelief, Catherine spoke up. No, that's fine. Let's divorce, she said wearily.
Huh?
Ralph deflated. He probably didn't expect Catherine, who had been trying to stop the divorce until a moment ago, to agree to it so easily. Ugh, I'm sick of it all. Didn't know he was such a mama's boy. Shocking. Can't do it now that I know the truth. And you think I'm the better option?
Wait, Catherine.
Ralph desperately tried to grab Catherine's arm, but she rejected his touch. So that settles it. None of us will get back with Ralph. I smiled, Catherine laughed, and Ralph sobbed. Oh right, there was one more thing. Ralph and Catherine looked puzzled at my words. The child you and Catherine have is probably genuinely yours. Well, we can't be sure without a DNA test. Ralph quickly interjected.
What do you mean?
A colleague of mine, Lily, personally got curious and inquired about the circumstances when you and Catherine met. Our company, being a large temp agency, still has several employees deployed at your company, so we had some connections. As a result, we found out quite a bit.
What did you find out?
Just as Catherine said earlier, There was a boss who persistently invited her to dinner, but Catherine was more troubled by him than anything. There was nothing going on between them. Catherine had been dating and seemed settled lately. Her wild days were a thing of the past. Lily even apologized, thinking she might have caused unnecessary worry with her misunderstanding. Catherine looked uncomfortable at my words, staying silent. It seemed to be true. How ironic that her husband Ralph didn't believe her, but his ex-wife did. So the child is really mine? I've been saying that all along. Don't think apologizing now will change anything. I've already decided to divorce and make sure I get the child support. Wait, Catherine, I was wrong. Ralph was desperately pleading with Catherine, but she was not listening. That's what happens when someone tries to have everything going back and forth. Learn some shame. Later, Catherine divorced Ralph, as declared, and got a hefty child support. Ralph had bought a house when he was married to me, but after the divorce, he sold it for a low price. He remarried Catherine, and while paying me compensation, struggled to start a new life, soon running out of money. Moreover, he drove out Catherine, an innocent woman, to remarry his ex-wife. Naturally, Catherine demanded compensation. To avoid court, Ralph agreed to her terms, handed over the house they had lived in, and returned to his parents' home. But his troubles didn't end there. Catherine had exposed everything about Ralph at her workplace, leading him to resign. Bad time for job hunting meant he struggled to find a new position, and ended up juggling part-time jobs to pay child support and compensation. Catherine apologized to me one day, saying, "I did a terrible thing by taking Ralph. Facing the same fate made me realize how awful it was. I want to be a better mother to my child and change." I haven't forgiven everything, but in a way, I'm thankful to Catherine for getting rid of Ralph quickly. To me, their apologies and dramatic divorce made this whole affair non-existent. I wouldn't tell them that, of course. As for me, I became close to a manager at the temp job I took after the incident. Married? After a bitter experience like that, I'm not eager to jump into marriage again. We go out for meals and outings, but he's not even my boyfriend yet. I enjoy his company, but I've also found peace in being alone. I refuse to live a life controlled by someone else. I'm enjoying a freer life now, going out with colleagues, attending drinking parties, and concerts with fellow music fans. It's not flashy, but I feel much more radiant than when I worried about a cheating husband or having children. For now, the kitten I just found might as well be my lover. I'm happiest alone for the first time. Solo life is great.